Hey everybody. Alright, so I wanted to give you a quick update. The next video is almost done. I wanted to give you a little roadmap of what I'm currently working on. So the next two videos I'm posting, they're gonna kind of be my, I would say, I guess, celebration of passing 1,000 videos. The first one is going to be a remake of Forest of a Thousand Legs, which is one of my favorites. And then the other one's going to be a remake of another story called Because You Are My Baby, which is also one of my favorite ones. I made theme songs for both of those stories, and I'm going to be remastering them and re-releasing them. Also, there's going to be new merchandise on the store, which is going to be like the first time I've made new merch in like 4 years. So I'm pretty excited for that. Here's some of the designs that I have. This is just for the Because You Are My Baby merch. One of them is going to be of the creature, and then the other one's just going to be a plain, like tree background because I thought it looked pretty cool. It's going to be on like sweaters and shirts and things like that. I don't have the Forest of a Thousand Legs merchandise finalized yet, but I just wanted to let you all know that that's going to be happening. So yeah, next video will probably be up within the next few days. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you have a great day.
I had the strangest roommate in my freshman year of college. Despite being otherwise normal and even a bit shy, Eddie would, every so often, become frantically possessed by a sudden, overwhelming need to lock the door. It didn't matter which door either. Wherever he was when the fit came upon him, he would leap up, run to the closest entrance, and lock it. People who stood in his way were screamed at. Anyone who tried to stop him would get attacked. He became a ranting, sweating madman until his mysterious sense of vulnerability passed. But the moment it was gone, he would apologize profusely, sink timidly into himself, and scurry away embarrassed. For that reason, it was hard to hate him. But it became a little easier to despise him each time I returned home to find myself locked out. Similarly, each time I brought him to a party and he had one of his episodes, I inevitably lost potential romantic interests and friends because I was roommates with that Eddie guy. Halfway through the year, after the third almost girlfriend ghosted me because he scared the shit out of her, I put in for a dorm room transfer and washed my hands of the poor guy. That was almost 7 years ago now, so when Eddie messaged me on social media and said he was in town and had run into some travel issues, I decided to give him another shot. I'd always felt sort of bad about how I treated him in the end, so I drove half an hour out to his broken down car and picked him up around 1 in the morning on a normal Wednesday night 3 weeks ago. I remember pulling up to the edge of a high cliffside road to see a skinny silhouette waving at me. He was leaner than I remembered, and somewhat more in shape. My headlights illuminated him fully. I saw his face glisten and I laughed. That was Eddie, all right. Sweat was sort of his hallmark. He hefted a duffel bag and ran up to my passenger side before fiddling with the door handle repeatedly. "Don't pull it when I'm unlocking it," I told him. He waited a tick. I pushed the button and he tried the handle at the same time. "Oops. Wait," I said again, hitting unlock as I did so. "Okay, now." He finally got the door open and clambered in with a nervous laugh. "Sorry, man." His long legs folded up a bit as he got situated, and I could see his exposed ankles. "Thanks for picking me up." I shrugged. No problem at all. "Do you know what's wrong with it?" "Yeah, the alternator's been having trouble. I think the cold weather finally did her in." "Cool." I gave a slight cough to clear my throat, and we drove in awkward silence until he brought up a joke from the past. Just like that, we slipped into that first semester 7 years before, with all its new experiences, hilarious misadventures, and surprise pressures. By the time we reached my place, I'd remembered the good things about him, and I was glad I'd decided to help him out. On the way, I pointed to the couch. "That's probably the best spot in the apartment. I'm trying to save money these days, so the place is pretty small." "Rent these days, eh?" he asked before placing his duffel bag down and sitting carefully on the couch to evaluate his softness. "This'll do fine. I can't thank you enough. I'll get out of your hair in the morning as soon as the repair shop's open." "No problem at all, Eddie. Well, actually, I go by Ed now." "Good for him. He'd definitely grown as a person from the socially fearful outcast I remembered. I grinned. "Then no problem at all, Ed." I went to bed back in my room without a single worry. It seemed like his issue had been resolved by maturity or medication, and who was I to judge someone for troubles beyond their control? That was in the past. Of course, I was completely wrong. Around 4 in the morning, I awoke to get up to get a glass of water from the kitchen. I knew my own apartment, so my footsteps were pretty much silent, but Eddie still sighed and stirred on the couch as if something was bothering him. I stood by the fridge, glass in hand, as he whimpered, struggled, and then leapt up. In a mad dash, he ran to my front door and slammed the deadbolt. He gave out a deep breath of relief and remained there with his head down while I tried to figure out the best way to let him know I was present. Well, if he was having a fit, there was no good way to do this. "Ed?" He seized up mightily, gasped in as much air as his lungs could hold, and then slowly turned around. His face was obscured in dimness, since the only light came from the various red or green pinpoints on the television and microwave, but I could tell he was sweating profusely. After a long moment, he managed to breathe again. Finally, he said, "Oh, hey, I didn't see you there." "Yeah." I put my glass down on the counter. "You alright, dude?" He meant his laugh to sound nonchalant, but it just came out nervous and high-strung. "It's the same old, same old. You know how it is." I went around the counter and approached him. He moved back a few steps, and I touched the door. "This is a safe neighborhood. There's nothing to worry about." He nodded awkwardly. Unsure I believed his calmness, I moved my hand to the deadbolt. I wanted to make sure he wasn't going to get weird while I was asleep if I went back to bed. He made a sudden, half-halted leap toward me, hand out. "Don't!" At that moment, I was starting to remember the times I'd seen him attack people during an episode. "There's nothing out there." I gripped the deadbolt and turned it back toward me, but a very slight shadow moved somewhere in my vision. The hell? No, it couldn't be. Reacting rapidly, I put my eye to the peephole. My brain made sense of the curved panorama just in time to see a sliver of silhouette disappear along the sidewalk to the left. Eddie moved closer, bringing the smell of his panicked sweat with him. "Did you see something?" "No." I lied. I kept staring out through the peephole, watching the quiet night in my otherwise unremarkable neighborhood. The asphalt glimmered darkly under the stars, while distant lampposts cast long shadows across the grass. "Remind me again, what suddenly makes you want to lock the door?" Now that I wasn't actively trying to unlock it, he seemed slightly less manic. "I never told you because I thought you were starting to hate me. But when I was 8 years old, I had a sudden feeling that I should lock the door. I didn't, and..." He shivered. "Some men broke in a moment later and robbed us." I frowned at his glistening shadowed face. "Jesus, was anyone hurt?" He nodded between audible breaths. My mom, Another 3 breaths passed in the otherwise silent darkness. "She didn't make it." "Damn." I didn't know what else to say. Just, damn. No wonder. No wonder? Before I could elaborate, the sound of something skittering outside reached us. He turned and listened in one rapid motion like a startled animal, and I had to admit I was none too calm either. Still, I couldn't risk amping up his anxiety. I did want to sleep again at some point. He whispered, "Where was that?" It sounded like it came from the back. I whispered too. "I'm sure it's nothing. Let's go." I led the way and crept through my apartment. He made sure to mimic my steps, but he was still louder than me, and I nearly winced at every creak. By the time we entered my bedroom and reached a rear window, my nerves were raw. The window was fitted with stops that prevented it from opening all the way. I usually left it open for the breeze, even in the winter. We sat in total darkness in front of that thin rectangle of cool air, looking and listening. Have you ever actually listened to the sound of the city at night? What I'd gotten used to as silence was actually anything but. Soft wind stirred a rustling in the nearby trees. A train blew a horn in the unknown distance. A dog barked twice, and briefly an ambulance siren trekked across the horizon. Under it all, constant low haunting wail emanated from across the world from the nearby highway. I'd always hated that sound whenever I'd accidentally become aware of it because I thought it sounded like 1,000 ghosts screaming from very far away. But I wasn't about to tell Eddie that. It was about that time that my gaze landed upon something among the trees. When I'd first seen the closely bunched collection of white pinpoints, I just assumed they were reflections from somewhere. Now though, as I watched them carefully, I was nearly certain I was seeing them rotate upward. It was as if someone was spinning a wheel of lights whose narrow side was facing us. From the size of the distance, the wheel must have been 2 or 3 feet in diameter. I whispered, "What is that?" After finding it with help from my pointing finger, Eddie's stare deepened. I've never seen anything like that. What could it possibly be? I couldn't make sense of it. While I watched, it grew slightly dimmer, then slightly brighter. It's definitely casting light around it. I think I saw some leaves above it. Is it changing? Eddie clutched my wrist as he stared at those strange, upwheeling lights. Is it getting bigger? I couldn't be sure, but how could it be getting bigger unless... Jumping up, I placed my fingers on either side of the window and brought it down swiftly and quietly. Then I turned the latch and locked it before pulling the nearby cord and sliding the blinds down. Whatever it is, we're secure in here. We'll be fine. It's probably just some kids playing with light toys or something. He sighed and opened his mouth to speak, but a visible change came over the silhouetted contours of his head. An instant later, he leapt over and slammed my bedroom door shut. The boom echoed loudly in my ears. I demanded to know what he was doing as he locked my door. Eddie turned around and put his back to it. I could tell he was wild-eyed from the way he whispered, "Be quiet. It's in your apartment." The adrenaline spike from the slammed door made me a little angrier than I wanted to be. What's in my apartment?" His frantic whisper was nearly a hiss. "I don't know. I just know that we have to keep this door locked." I was fuming, but if I spoke, I would have said something I regretted. So we stood there in the dark for a solid few minutes. I began to calm down as those minutes passed, and once I was in control again, I opened my mouth to whisper, "Hey, I'm sorry, The floor creaked outside my bedroom door. I froze. Eddie backed away from the door and faced it alongside me. It was nothing but a dark rectangle in front of us, but I stared at it for any hint of motion or change. The crazy thing was, I had no idea what I was even looking or listening for. What could possibly have been out there? Not only had we left the front door locked, there had been no sound of entry, forced or otherwise. If there was something or someone out there, how had they gotten in? Dim light began to move across the walls of my room. I waited for the sound of a passing car, but none came. As we watched the door, bright light began to roll upwards around us, again as if someone was spinning some sort of lit wheel. It didn't take long for us to realize that whatever we'd seen in the distance outside was growing closer to the window. Beyond the blinds, something was coming nearer, but neither of us dared look away from my bedroom door for even an instant. Then I saw it. Between moving lines of shadow and light, I could have sworn my door handle had changed angles. I backed away. A look at the blinds showed definite lights spinning closer, as if they were right outside the window and about to come up against it. Grabbing Eddie by the shoulder, I pulled him with me into the tiny one-person bathroom. He closed and locked the door the instant we were inside. My heart was hammering in my chest to the point of actual pain. Grunting my whisper, I asked, "What the hell is happening?" He shook his head. I have no idea." "Are you sure?" I asked him, squeezing his wrists. "This all started with that robbery and attack on your mom, right?" "No," he whispered back. My bathroom door was flush to the outside carpet, but hints of rotating light began to appear beneath, as if that insane, impossible wheel had somehow entered the room without opening or breaking the window. None of this made sense. "It has to be you somehow." "No, it has to be!" I shook him violently. "Is your fear making it real? Is something after you? You don't understand," he whimpered. "I didn't finish the story. It didn't start with that incident. I'd been getting the urge to lock the doors for years before that. The first time I didn't, that's when they came." I couldn't understand exactly what he meant. "The robbers?" He shook his head. "God, They weren't robbers, were they? He shook his head again. My voice dropped to a razor hiss. What's out there, Eddie? All he could say was, they want in. Something about the way he said it finally made me understand. It's not about the bathroom door, is it? I looked out through it, thinking of my bedroom door and my apartment door beyond that. It's not about the literal entrance to the room you're in. The rotating light below began intensifying as whatever was out there approached our hiding spot. His panicked grip on my hands told me I was right. Then why do you lock real doors, Eddie? I shook him until he looked at me despite his fear. Is it a metaphor? Does it make you feel better? Does it close them off somehow? Why isn't it working this time? He began to cry, sending mixed drops of tears and sweat onto my forearms. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm tired of the constant struggle. The high cliffside curb where I'd picked him up flashed through my mind, clear as crystal, and the fear that had been building since the moment I saw him suddenly left me. He'd gone to that cliff for a reason, and he'd probably had second thoughts as he stood there alone in the dark. Completely calm, I asked him, Your car didn't break down, did it? He shook his head. You messaged everyone, didn't you? He nodded, and I was the only one that responded. He rocked back and forth in front of me. I just couldn't take it anymore. They want in. They're always out there. They want in. I lock them out, but they never stop. I'm tired of being terrified every minute of every day. Air began moving under the door as the light reached peak intensity outside. Whatever it was almost upon us. There's nowhere to go, Eddie. Let's open the door. Maybe you're constantly terrified because they want you that way. Let's face them. Let's be unafraid. It might just work. He didn't respond, but I dragged him to his feet. I had never wanted to do anything less in my entire life, but there was nowhere else to go. With a firm grip on his wrist, I reached forward with my free hand, unlocked the door, and flung it open. I don't care if you believe me. That's not the point, but I'll tell you what I saw. The lights were eyes. They were bright enough to obscure the grotesque moving body beneath. I still can't understand how it was spinning like that. Snake-like curves connected things in shadow. Every blazing pinpoint swung up, flashed us with images of hatred and fear and paranoia, and then continued past, moving on too fast to process. That was the thing. The images were lies. My girlfriend was cheating on me. My teachers at school had thought of me as a failure. My boss hated me and only put up with me because he hadn't found a replacement yet. But each individual lie raced past too quickly to pick apart and resist. I knew they weren't true, but they just kept coming. At the heart of this creature, I sensed hunger for fear. I kicked a wide, grasping mouth away and jerked Eddie out with me, getting a few feet past whatever the hell that thing was. It turned toward us as I flung the bedroom door open. I'd been right about the door handle turning. That much I knew in that instant. The madly spinning shadows and light failed to illuminate the beast that lay beyond the door. Immediately, I knew the thing behind us was just a servant of this, because it was so much worse. The only thing I truly registered was a melted face. Its misshapen gaze seized the beating heart muscles in my chest and filled me with absolute terror, as if it had the power to reach inside me and dredge out all the blackness and animal fear in the corners of my human soul. I knew these things didn't want into my apartment or bedroom. It wasn't so simple as that. They wanted into our world, and Eddie was some sort of conduit for that nightmarish goal. He always has been. I had the knife-keen, vicious sense that I needed to kill him immediately, but maybe that urge came from the emotion these creatures were giving off. As the sludge specter with the melted face began a rising scream that threatened to deafen me, I did what I had to do. I grabbed the heavy lamp from my nightstand and smashed the window clean through. I threw Eddie out a moment after, and then pulled my arms from a burning grip of caustic acid to escape. I could only lay on the ground screaming as Eddie did the rest by dragging me away from that place. That was 3 weeks ago. The burn from the grasping hand of the sludge creature refused to heal. The doctors at the emergency room couldn't make heads or tails of it. Something had burned the shape of a melted hand around my forearm and continued to burn as they studied it. They could find no acid, no catalyst, no heat. Eventually, they had to release me, Of course, their lack of understanding didn't lessen the hefty medical bill any. I departed from Eddie the next day, telling him to stay strong and remain unafraid. We'd beaten the forces of hatred and paranoia personified and escaped with our lives by charging through rather than hiding. He seemed unconvinced and repeatedly said that we hadn't done anything, that I'd dragged him out of there, and that without me, he didn't know if he could do it. But I have a life to live, I told him. Gotta pay off that ER bill and find a new place. He understood, or at least, he said that he did. Today, I saw Eddie again. He didn't know I was there, because it was just a chance encounter on a city street. He was in a bar, watching a television above and drinking a beer. I stood outside and watched him through the window for a moment, awed at the change. He was sitting with new friends. He was wry, confident, and completely ignoring the door of the bar instead of nervously looking at the entrance every so often. It was such a positive change that I actually went inside with a smile. But I stopped about 10 feet behind him as, over the noise of the bar television above, I began to hear what he was talking about. His words floated in the air with a nearly perceptible stench. Sludge dripped from the back of his sentences, burning the ears of those near his group. His new friends agreed happily and replied noxiously in kind. A disgruntled customer nudged me as he passed. "Ignore those assholes." I turned away with misting eyes and walked out into the chill night. I hadn't saved Eddie at all. He'd found refuge not in standing up to those creatures, but by going down a path I hadn't even considered. I looked through the window of that bar one last time. The misshapen creature that had burned me with its touch grinned back from the shadowed corner behind the television. It had found the entry into our world that it had craved for so long. I had unlocked the door, but it was Eddie that let them in.
Most of us feel quite safe when the weather turns bad. We have houses, castles of steel, plaster, and wood. We have television and the internet, systems to warn us about anything actually dangerous. Modern life serves every need. Aside from natural disasters, weather rarely poses a problem in the 21st century. Gone are the days of muddy caves, of huts and villages. Now we live in monuments to our achievement. And so, when rain comes down in sheets, when cracks of light split the open air and reverberating rumbles follow, we feel nothing but excitement. But sometimes, the atmosphere beyond our walls is violent enough to unnerve us. The wind is powerful enough to make our homes creak and the tap of the rain turn into a roar. Then thunder erupts just outside, impossibly loud. The ground shakes, and for a moment, a primal urge to hide takes over. Our instincts are buried deep, but the untamed might of a storm can dredge them up. Because at the core, we're still frightened animals. We just upgraded our caves. It was on such a thunderous night that I spoke to the Soul Eater. I'd finished my evening rituals and crawled under the sheets. The noise of the rain comforted me at first, a soothing static lull. But when the storm intensified, my breath grew shallow with anxiety. I've never bothered with psychiatric help, so I don't know what diagnosis they'd give my brain, but whatever plagues me, it's twisted my thoughts since childhood. I thought about my mind a lot that night, laying in my bed as the window flashed with lightning. Why am I the way I am? What does it mean to be me? Is it even worth it to be me? These questions swirled in my head as the storm raged outside. I found no answers. The interesting thing was that most people would actually want to be me, or at least to live my lifestyle. I'd found success in writing thriller novels, and my possessions were impressive. My home was grand and stately, situated in a woodland corner of a nice neighborhood. Yet it was empty. Nobody shared my home with me. I was also empty myself. I had nobody with which to share my true self. I was hyper-conscious of the fact that I'd missed out on young love. that beautiful, blissful experience. 30 years old and alone? Sure, I could find someone, but the damage of loneliness had already been done. And since I wasn't living for somebody else, what was I really living for? I'd never particularly enjoyed life. When I was a teenager, I lived because I had a future. When I was in my early 20s, I lived to take care of my mother. When I was in my late 20s, I lived because I had stories to tell. Now that future was here, my mother was gone, my stories told. What was left? Years of rotting in this mansion, of trying to recover the feeling of youth I wasted? It would never return. Not much of a point in continuing. The thunder rang out like 1,000 simultaneous gunshots. My house, my enormous empty house, shuddered, shaking dust from the ceiling. Instinctively, I pulled the blankets over my head before a sense of shame for my childish reactions took over and forced the covers back down. I realized I needed to sleep. My thoughts were taking a dark turn, my emotions were bubbling to the surface, dredged up by the storm. I tried to lie still and shut off my thoughts. Seconds turned to minutes, and then to hours. I was preparing myself to go grab some Ambien when another crack of thunder exploded over the house. As the rumble faded, I heard something else. A dull thud from downstairs. The front door had been slammed shut. I remembered locking it last night. I lay quietly, pondering. A robbery? Should I call the cops or pretend to sleep? What if it wasn't a robbery at all? Perhaps some poor soul caught in the storm had sought shelter.
Nicholas,
Called a deep voice from outside my room. My heart froze. Goosebumps broke out across my entire body. Whoever was out there, they sounded like no human I'd ever met before. I tried to sit upright. Nothing happened. I couldn't move. It was like I was being held in place by an invisible weight. Sleep paralysis. It had happened to me from time to time. The phenomenon always carried a heavy burden of fear due to the connotation of hallucinations, but this time, I found it somewhat reassuring. It meant that the voice outside my door wasn't real. I held my breath as the doorknob turned, slowly, agonizingly. My bedroom door creaked as it swung open and a figure came into view. The man was floating horizontally, as if he lay face down on thin air. As he drifted across the room and over my bed, I had a sickening realization. It was me. My body, my face, even the pajamas that I had at that very moment. He became motionless as he hovered directly above me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then his thin mouth moved, and the voice that emerged was so alien that I couldn't imagine it syncing with a person's lips, much less my own.
hello, Nicholas.
Deep, knowing, mournful, as if the ocean could speak, and above that, a barely perceptible static buzz in the words. I only stared.
Come on now, be polite,
chided the ghost. I found I could speak. You're not real, I told him. At this, my face, suspended just a few feet above me, only smiled.
I was thinking we could have a conversation.
The hallucination's voice boomed around the room, echoing from more distant corners of the house.
About what?
I asked him. I tried to move my arms and legs, but they refused to respond. It would be a long night.
Life, death, you.
I answered with a stare, at which the facsimile of me broke into an even larger grin.
Let's start with a question. Why are you still alive?
Of course he knew my thoughts. This was, after all, my dream. Still, a weird feeling crept through my paralyzed body when he mentioned the exact same question I'd just asked myself. Because my life has value, I answered.
Hardly a satisfactory answer, Nicholas. Why does your life have value?
The ghost said in that unearthly voice. I hesitated for a few moments. There are good things in my life. I eat well, I relax, I want for nothing.
Good.
The floating version of me chuckled.
Eating well is good? Relaxing is good? What about the bad, Nicholas? It doesn't matter how satisfied your material urges are if your soul is diseased.
I didn't answer. The fear that had dissipated minutes ago returned at the words. This didn't feel like a normal dream.
Ponder this. How does the good in your life compare to the bad? The negatives are overwhelming. You have more regret than pride. You have more anger than joy. You have more aches and pains than comfortable moments. And your loneliness outweighs your love with the gravity of a world.
Shut up, I told the thing and shut my eyes. Again, I tried to move, and again, my body failed me.
No.
The word resounded, sonorous and static, from inches above my face. I opened my eyes and found that the ghost had moved much closer. The smile had left his face.
Every moment is a battle between joy and pain, and which one wins the majority of the time. There's no formula I can contrive to prove this to you, but you know the truth, deep within you. You see, Nicholas, here's the truly sad aspect of all of this. You live a better life than the vast majority of all humans that have ever lived, and you're still unhappy. What does that tell you about life?
Life is suffering, I conceded. It was a mantra some of my characters liked to repeat. He smiled again, suspended over me, and floated upwards a few inches. I hated my own face at that moment, a taunting and smug grin.
So, why live?
His question came out as a whisper that held more menace than any of the previous booming statements. I stared up at the being. Faith, I answered after a minute. His laugh was loud and rolling like a series of crashing waves.
Faith,
he repeated.
Faith in what?
Life is made of uncertainty. What if there's someone up there?
Someone up there? You pitiful thing. You know there's nobody, nothing, and if, by some great accident, there was a being that created you, would you not curse it for your flaws? For the suffering inherent in what you are? A god which created you would be nothing short of evil.
I can't explain it. I don't have to. That's what faith is, a passion for something greater than yourself. But as I said the words, I knew I didn't believe them. I'd never been religious.
Liar,
taunted the ghost, as he pointed an arm down at me.
And even if you weren't attempting to deceive yourself, think of the very notion of a grand scheme of things. Some kind of cosmic plan. Is it truly a comforting idea that you are merely a cog in the machine created by an incomprehensible force?
A cold feeling spread through me at that, but I forced myself to ignore it. I kept forgetting it was still a dream, only a manifestation of my subconscious. I couldn't let it disturb me, but there was something about the way the ghost moved and spoke that just wasn't right. It was like no sleep paralysis episode I'd ever suffered.
Nicholas, why live?
Asked the hallucination once more. Because the future, I answered. He smiled and opened his mouth, but I cut him off. And no, not because I think I'm destined to be successful like I used to think. I mean, because I can wake up tomorrow, go to Europe, because I can choose to do anything I want. Maybe I'm unhappy, maybe there's really nothing divine out there, but I have the freedom to choose my life. I felt determined to beat this thing. As I understood it, the dream would end when I proved him wrong and showed him that my life was worth living. He stared down at me, not visibly angry, but when he spoke, the static buzz in his voice was more noticeable.
Wrong.
For the first time, I noticed his eyes. They were not exactly like mine. Some kind of yellow tint pervaded them.
Wrong,
he said again.
You aren't free, you worm. You are a puppet, a biological object used to perpetuate your species. You say you can go to Europe tomorrow, but you won't. You only do what your urges tell you. You are the sum total of the forces that evolution built inside of you.
That raised even more defiance in me. You know what? That doesn't even matter. I feel free, and so I am. Fundamentally, there's no difference in my reality either way.
But Nicholas, even if you feel free, is that not a negative experience? Is there not horror in being forced into this world without meaning? A wanderer condemned to seek something he can never find. As long as you hold this delusion close to your heart that you are free, you will never be satisfied, because you must surely believe that there is some combination of choices out there that will save you from what you are.
The cold feeling returned, and I recognized it for what it was, the realization that the ghost was right. For all the malice and hopelessness that poured out of his grinning mouth, his refutations made sense. The ghost didn't stop.
That's the bane of it all, really. Consciousness. That awareness, that sickening knowledge that you exist. Human beings, they don't really want to be beings, they just want to be. But yourself cannot ever simply be, for it strives constantly. Yourself, Nicholas, strives to disintegrate. Look behind the veil of the most enjoyable activities in this life and realize they are a process of becoming unself. Sex, drugs, love, even fun itself. Happiness is the process of killing self-awareness.
I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to move, hoping that the nightmare would end. When I opened them again, the ghost lay on top of me. I could see nothing but his eyes, so much like mine, but with the strange yellow light behind them. "What do you want?" I asked him.
Your soul,
he said. I thought I was just a biological creature without a soul.
Then it should be nothing to relinquish.
What do you want me to do? I whispered.
Give up,
he whispered back, and static filled the room. The ghost floated higher, nearly disappearing into the murky gloom of my high arched ceiling. Then he began to change, and the facade of me, the facade of humanity, fell away like a withered leaf, and I saw how vast the thing truly was. It hung in the air like smoke and filled the mind in a way that pushed out all ability to describe it. When I regained my words, I asked, "What are you?"
The Soul Eater,
it said, a dry buzzing in its words. I did not respond.
Nicholas, it's time.
The demon told me.
Give in. Let me have it.
The thing was right. It was right about me. It was right about the world. It was right about life. No. I spat the word. Something in me wanted to live. The demon above shifted and writhed.
Why?
Because what is life for, if not continuation? There's a force inside me, and I want to preserve it. I don't care how shitty things are. The Soul Eater hissed. It grew until there was nothing else. And then it tried to strip my soul. There's not much I can say that will accurately describe what I felt in that moment. It should suffice to say that I am scarred, and I will never forget it, but I won. I fought off those grasping threads of spirit. Life won. Eventually, the Soul Eater withdrew.
You and I, we will do this again.
A lump of dread manifested in me. What if the being came when I was weak? Then I realized I just fought it off at my weakest moment, and some sort of pride filled me. And I will win again, I told it.
You've won millions of times already, but on one of these repetitions you will fail. You see, Nicholas, the universe repeats itself. It expands, it contracts, it re-expands, and every time the same things happen. Almost. There are two things that change. The first is myself, and I have been present for every rise and fall from the dawn of time and before. I exist in another place, in another way. The universe does not control me. And so I last through the endless back and forth, living through realities as you live through minutes. The second, Nicholas, is that the universe is dying. Every expansion, every contraction, it grows weaker, fainter, and you, right now, are an uncountable number of expansions from the beginning. One of these days you will have faded enough to give in. There is a secret only I know, Nicholas.
What? I asked, terrified to hear the answer.
Everything already ended.
The thing hissed in a hoarse whisper.
It's over. The universe once existed in glory, but it's dead now. You're just the fading ripples, a pale echo of what once was.
And with that, the Soul Eater moved back through my door, out of my house and into the night. And as soon as it left, I found I could move again. I held my hands to my face and cried, just sobbed for the longest time. It had to have been the most traumatic dream of my life. But of course, it was just that, a dream. Sleep paralysis, a common psychological phenomenon, but that didn't explain why my door was open. It's been 10 years since my conversation with the Soul Eater. My life is different now. I found a wife that I love. I had kids. Little bundles of happiness and energy that exhaust and delight me. Gone are the days of lying alone in my bed, staring up at the ceiling, wondering what I was missing. And so, when I have negative thoughts, when I begin to wonder if this world is worth living in, the answer is lying right next to me, and in the rooms across the hall. But sometimes, I see a familiar figure in the distance outside my house, or when I'm driving the kids to school. I spot a glimpse of my doppelganger on the side of the road, floating just a few inches off the ground and grinning. And for a moment, I remember everything. I feel everything that I felt that night. I realize I've buried the truth with a textbook lifestyle designed to be fulfilling. Because at the core, I'm still a lonely animal, fending off the truth of an uncaring world. I just upgraded my defenses.
For the past 5 years, it's just been Ian and me. My wife's pregnancy with him wasn't easy. There were a number of scares and close calls due to health issues that she had experienced all her life. Every doctor she had ever been to had told her that she would never be able to get pregnant in the first place. She put on a brave face and joked that she would get an entire litter of puppies instead. But when she was thinking about it and didn't know I was watching, her real feelings were etched all over her face. She loved kids, and the thought of not being able to have one herself was heartbreaking for her. We discussed other options, of course. Adoption, fostering, you name it, and we looked into it. We even had a meeting scheduled with an adoption agency when a miracle happened. That miracle was Ian. Against all the odds, Ellen became pregnant. Her doctors were at a complete loss. It should have been impossible, but suddenly there we were, talking about converting our second bedroom into a nursery and planning out how to shuffle around our work schedules to make sure that one of us was always home with the baby. The complications began about 4 months into the pregnancy. It seemed like every few weeks we were at the hospital while the staff ran tests or performed procedures. Ellen was amazing during all of it. I was acting like a complete lunatic, worried out of my mind about every little thing, but she would just lay there in the uncomfortable hospital bed, stroking her increasingly large belly and smiling to herself. She would tell me that she just knew that everything would work out in the end, and that all of the issues were just bumps in the road. She went into labor early, just a few days after the 31-week mark. She waddled into the kitchen and told me in a very calm and very matter-of-fact tone that the baby was coming. I had been getting ready for bed, so, in that same collected manner, she retrieved the bag we had packed weeks earlier and the car keys, while I frantically got dressed and grabbed a few necessary items that hadn't gone into the bag yet. 6 hours later, Ian was born. He was so small, and I could feel my heart sink as he emerged. The doctor immediately took him over to a radiant warmer table, where he and a nurse began working with him. A second nurse kept me from getting too close to ensure that I didn't get in the way. The activity suddenly stopped, and the most wonderful sound filled the room. Our son started to cry. The doctor informed me that due to Ian's size, he would need to spend a couple of weeks in the newborn intensive care unit, but that from what he could see, the child would be fine. I remember feeling so relieved that I had to put a hand on the bed's footboard to steady myself. My fingers had just touched the plastic when the alarm on Ellen's monitor went off. Ian and I lost her in less than an hour. It wasn't anything that the hospital staff did wrong, and it wasn't anything that could have been prevented. The stress of the labor and birth had been too much for her, and she suffered massive hemorrhaging.
The staff did their absolute best to save her. It just wasn't possible. She never even got to hold Ian before she was gone. I never got a chance to mourn her. I was now a single parent, and all that mattered was that tiny little baby in the NICU. The next few weeks were spent going to work, getting through my shift, and immediately returning to the hospital to sit with Ian all night before doing it all over again. Shortly before he was released, I secured a position with a new company. It paid less, but it allowed me to work from home. Without much of a family support system, I needed to be there for him at all times. After all, it was just me and him now. I wish so much that Ellen could see this incredible child that we made together. He's loving, energetic, frustrating, confounding, and so much more. He's everything that we could have hoped for. He also has a very vivid imagination for his age, which is partly why I didn't believe him when he first told me that he was being visited by something during the night. It took a while to get to this point, but we've settled into a routine each evening. We have dinner together, spend about an hour running around outside if the weather is nice, or playing inside if it isn't. Ian gets his bath, and then he lays down to sleep for the night. This routine is supposed to be finished around 8 o'clock each night, but if you have kids, you know that no routine is foolproof. On the first night that he was visited, I didn't manage to get him wrangled into bed until almost 9. I was catching up on work at my desk when I heard Ian yell for me. I'm ashamed to admit that my first reaction was to feel irritated. Normally, when he called out like that, it was to try to get one last drink of water or to tell me that he isn't tired and can't go to sleep. That would happen at least twice a week. I said that I have an incredible child, not one that wasn't prone to the usual 4-year-old tendencies. When he immediately cried out a second time, though, I stood up and pushed my chair back so hard that it tipped over. There was panic in his voice. I hurried up the short flight of stairs to the second floor and flung his door open, my hands immediately going for the light switch. Ian was sitting in his bed with tears streaming down his face. The left leg of his pajama pants was pulled up and his hands were pressed down on his skin. The sheets and comforter from his bed were laying on the floor. His pillow was hanging halfway off the mattress. I hurried over to him and knelt down next to his bed, putting down the safety rail as I did so. He immediately flung his arms around my neck and started crying harder. I pried him off of me and held him in my lap to allow him to catch his breath. We sat there for a long time, him crying and sniffing loudly, with me gently stroking his hair and telling him that everything was all right. When he finally calmed down, I sat him on the edge of his bed and took his hands away from his leg. There were 3 long scratches running down it. They weren't deep, but there were a few tiny beads of blood. I gently asked him what happened. He remained silent. I asked him again, and this time he lifted his head to look me in the eyes.
Nighty Night hurt me,
he told me in a tiny voice. I looked back at him in confusion. I don't know what I had expected him to say, but it certainly hadn't been that. Nighty Night? I asked softly. Like what I tell you at night before you go to sleep?
Nighty Night.
Ian repeated, more forcefully this time.
He scratched me like the bad cat did.
Just after his 3rd birthday, he had been scratched by a neighbor's kitten while trying to play with it. The claws had even punctured the skin, but the incident had stuck with him. I'm sorry, big guy, I don't understand. Are you saying that Nighty Night is a cat?
No cat. Nighty Night is a monster, Daddy. He hurt me.
I looked back down at the scratches. They were obviously real, but just as obviously, they hadn't been caused by any monster. Something else had happened. I want to make it clear that I never thought for a second that Ian was lying to me. Sure, he was prone to the occasional fib, just like any young child was, but he never lied to me about important things. Besides, he was too scared to be making up a story. Scooping Ian into my arms, I carried him into the bathroom and got the first aid kit out of the cabinet. As I sat down on the toilet and maneuvered him onto my lap, I mentally slapped my forehead. For the past few nights, I had forgotten to trim his fingernails when I had given him his bath. He must have scratched himself in his sleep. It hadn't woken him up, and his still half-asleep mind must have interpreted the whole thing as a monster attacking him. I quickly bandaged the scratches before trimming his nails with a small silver clipper. He had calmed down by that point, and I gave him a hug before carrying him back to his room. When I went to put him down in bed, however, he held on to me so tightly that I nearly tipped forward. He absolutely refused to sleep in his bed that night. We ended up falling asleep together on the couch downstairs, and by the time the sun was up, he was back to his usual self. The events of the previous night seemed to be forgotten. It was Saturday, and because I didn't have to work the weekends, I took Ian to a local state park. We spent the entire day playing on the playground and splashing around in the lake. By the time we left the park and headed home, we were both exhausted. He fell asleep in the car seat just a few minutes away from the house. I carried him inside and up to his bed. He remained passed out through the entire process. I planned to let him sleep for an hour or so. He still needed to eat dinner, and I knew that if he napped for too long, it would be almost impossible to get him down that night. I kicked off my shoes and flopped down in a chair to enjoy the momentary silence. That silence didn't last long. It was shattered by Ian screaming. It wasn't a yelp or crying out like he had been the previous night. It was a full scream, one filled with pain and terror. I yelled his name as I leapt up the stairs and burst into his room. Ian was seated on the floor, his thumb in his mouth and his eyes watery. He was rocking back and forth slowly. He looked up at me with a blank expression, as if he knew that I was there, but my presence didn't mean anything to him. I picked him up, and as I did so, I felt something warm and wet on my hand. I pulled away from his back and saw that there was blood on my fingers. Just as I had the night before, I carried him into the bathroom and turned on the light. I immediately saw his back reflecting off the mirror over the sink, and I felt like ice was pouring into my veins. Pieces of his shirt were torn away, and the shreds that remained were red with blood. I sat Ian on the counter and lifted the shirt up over his head. He was unresponsive during the entire process, and the part of me that was still thinking clearly wondered if he was in shock. On his back were 3 cuts, each of them spaced roughly the same distance as the scratches on his leg. These were much deeper than those, though, and they were bleeding freely. I bandaged them as fast as I could before taking him downstairs and back out to the car. The cuts were too much for my basic first aid skills. He needed a doctor. The drive to the hospital was torture. I padded his car seat as much as I could with a blanket to try to take pressure off his back, but he started screaming in pain before we got very far. Knowing full well that this was illegal, I pulled over, unstrapped him, and sat him down in the passenger seat with him sitting sideways before getting back in and continuing to drive. Maybe that was the wrong call. I honestly don't know. All that I know is that I couldn't stand for him to be in agony like that. The nurse behind the emergency room desk immediately waved us through the door when she saw Ian's back through the window. She ran off to get a doctor, while I carefully sat him down on a nearby gurney. I hugged him as best I could without touching his back and told him everything was going to be okay. "I know it hurts, little man, but I have to ask you something," I told him, giving him a reassuring smile. "What happened?"
Nighty Night.
He replied immediately in a matter-of-fact voice.
Nighty Night hurt me.
I didn't have time to question him further. The doctor arrived, and she took one look at Ian's back before telling a nurse to wheel him into a nearby examination room. I went to follow, but the doctor told me that she thought it would be best if I waited outside. Her eyes were looking past me as she spoke, and when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw that she was looking at a security guard standing at the far end of the hallway. If I had been thinking straight, I would have understood what was happening, but at the time, I was too worried about Ian to figure out what the look meant. The doctor went into the examination room as the nurse came back out. She put her hand on my arm and gently led me away from the door. I protested, of course, but she made it clear that I had to come with her and answer some questions before I would be able to see Ian. She started by asking me if there were any pets or animals in the house, to which I replied that there weren't. She then asked if we had been with anyone else when his injuries occurred. When I told her that we hadn't, she followed up by inquiring if I had been drinking that day. That was the moment I started catching on. The hospital staff was trying to determine if I had been the one that hurt my son. At some point during the conversation, a man in a gray suit entered the hallway and came to a stop next to us. He introduced himself as a social worker, and he stated that it was his job to make sure that Ian was safe and got the best care possible. He asked his own set of questions, and I answered them as best I could, but I was sure that he wasn't really believing me. It didn't help that I couldn't tell what had happened because I had no idea myself. Sometime later, the doctor came back out of the room and informed me that while one of the cuts had been shallow enough to bandage, the other two had required stitches. To say that I was irate was an understatement. I wasn't upset that she had done what was medically necessary. I was angry that I had been kept out of the room the entire time, instead of being in there to comfort him during the process. She stood there calmly as I yelled, and once I had said my piece and was winding down, she told me that she was recommending that Ian stay at the hospital overnight for observation. After taking a deep breath, I asked as calmly as I could if I would be able to stay with him. She didn't answer, but the social worker did. He told me, in a clearly practiced tone, that due to the nature of the injuries, he was going to take Ian into his custody for the night while he worked to determine the nature of the injuries. His tone might have been pleasant and measured, but the implication behind his words was very clear. "You think that I hurt Ian?" I said, fighting back a second wave of anger. "I would never hurt my son. If you think for a second that I'm gonna let you, that's enough." The social worker snapped, cutting me off. "You need to stop right there. I haven't made a determination one way or another if I think you did this. I will say that I've met a lot of abusive fathers in my time, and you don't strike me as one of them. I have policies and protocols that I have to follow, though. What's best for everyone involved is if you go home for the night, get some sleep, and let me do my job so that we can get this put behind us." He had me caught off guard. I stared at him for a long moment before nodding once. Anything I did other than what he told me to would only jeopardize my situation, and even though the thought of being apart from Ian for a night made me sick, the thought of him being taken away permanently was much worse. I nodded again, and he patted me on the arm. He told me to come back in the morning and to ask for him at the desk before turning to go into the examination room. As the door opened, I clearly heard Ian call out for me. I left the hospital feeling as if my entire world was burning before my eyes. I went home and immediately marched up to Ian's room. I was determined to figure out what had happened to him. The scratches on his leg could have been explained away by him causing them in his sleep, but the cuts on his back were another matter. He couldn't have reached that area of his body. Even if he could, there was no way he could have made markings that deep. Something else had happened. I tore apart his room looking for answers. A loose screw or nail he had leaned up against, a broken piece of bed that I hadn't noticed, a toy with something protruding, anything. I examined every inch of the room from top to bottom. I came up empty. There was nothing that I could find that could have caused his injuries. Defeated, I leaned up against the wall and slid down to the floor. Something caught my eye, and I reached over to pick up a small stuffed duck. Its yellow cloth had faded, and overall it looked a bit worse for wear, but I could still easily identify it as the first toy Ellen had bought for Ian. It had been right after he had found out that she was pregnant. She had named it Mr. Quackers, an absurd name for an absurd-looking duck. The events of the day caught up with me, and I started to nod off. I felt my eyelids growing heavier with each heartbeat. This was good, I reasoned. I would get some sleep, then be at the hospital the moment the sun began to rise. That was when I saw the creature standing in the corner of the room. One moment there was nothing there, and the next, there it was. Its extremely tall, gray body bent over as it pushed up against the ceiling. Its limbs were extremely long and thin for the creature's size. 2 arms ended in 3 needle-like fingers that had to have extended at least 3 feet from the hands. Stretched out on its elongated neck was its face. Its lips, dry and cracked and missing entire chunks in some places, were pulled back into an eternal grin that exposed its oversized white teeth. The lidless eyes were black in the center, and the areas that on a person would have been white were the dried yellow color of old parchment. Dark ichor that had pooled in its jaws slowly dripped onto the floor as it watched me.
Nighty Night.
The creature rasped out. My entire body jumped as I snapped back to full consciousness. The creature was gone again, with no trace that it had ever been there in the first place. The spots where the ichor had splattered on the floor had vanished. I sat there on the floor, alone in the room, with my pulse racing and my breath coming in short gasps. I could have attempted to rationalize what I had seen. It probably would have been easy enough to convince myself that I had imagined it, that it was a trick of the light, that my nearly unconscious mind had twisted into a horrifying vision. That was a perfectly rational explanation. The problem was that I had seen it. I knew that it had been real. There was no question about it in my mind. It was impossible, but I was sure that it had been occupying the corner of the room across from me seconds earlier. My breath slowed, and my panic was slowly replaced by nausea as the realization came to me. Ian had also seen this creature. It had stood over my 4-year-old son with that nightmarish face. It had then proceeded to hurt him. Not once, but twice. If I was this scared, I couldn't fathom how frightened he had been. Nighty Night. Ian had called it Nighty Night. It must have said the same thing to him that it said to me. I got up off the floor and left the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I stood in the hall for a moment before rushing into the bathroom and throwing up in the toilet. It went on for quite some time, so long that I wondered if it would ever stop. When it finally did, I collapsed against the bathtub, lightheaded and close to passing out. There was a thud from inside of Ian's room. I lifted my head as best as I could and looked out through the bathroom doorway. I managed to focus my eyes just in time to see the knob on the bedroom door start to turn. There was an audible click, and the door slowly swung open. Nighty Night's face took up much of the bedroom door as it grinned at me. I tried to stand up, but I was too weak from throwing up to manage it. I could only watch as Nighty Night pressed its head against the wood frame. It was too large to make it through the opening. My feeling of relief was only momentary. Nighty Night started to push its head harder. Its face stretched back as its head slowly began to force its way through. It was like watching rubber being forced through a hole.
Nighty Night.
It rasped, the voice coming out distorted through the stretched lips. I had to leave, and I had to do so quickly. More of the monster's head was making it through the doorway every second, and it wouldn't be long before it was free of the room. Ignoring my aches and pains, I forced myself into a standing position. My head swam once again. I was sure that I was going to pass out, but somehow I was able to barely remain conscious. Nighty Night's face was almost all the way through the doorway now. I stumbled into the hallway and pressed myself up against the wall opposite from the creature. Being as careful as I could, I moved past it, feeling its hot breath on me as I did so. Its teeth were mere inches away from my body. I made it through the thin opening and hurried down the stairs. My foot caught on the last step. It wasn't enough to make me lose my balance entirely, but it did trip me up, and I stumbled forward before falling over the side of the couch. My head struck one of the armrests. I must have blacked out. I don't remember doing so, but the next thing I knew, I was being awoken by the sound of knocking. I sat up on the couch and immediately regretted doing so, as the worst headache I'd ever had greeted me. The knocking continued. It took a few seconds to figure out that someone was banging on the front door. I stood up and took 2 steps towards the door before I remembered what had happened. I looked up the stairs, expecting to see Nighty Night squeezing its way down the hallway towards me, but the creature was gone. Still a bit dazed and not sure what else to do, I continued over to the front door and opened it. Standing on the other side was a large man in a police uniform. He was holding a clipboard under his arm and a pen in one hand. He nodded at me, but didn't smile. He asked me my name, and I gave it to him. He informed me that he was here at the request of the social worker from the hospital, and that he would like to inspect my son's room. I moved aside and let him into the house. I closed the door behind him and led him up the stairs. I didn't want to go anywhere near the 2nd floor after what I had experienced, but if I didn't comply with his request, it would undoubtedly impact my chances of getting Ian back as soon as possible. I took him to the still open bedroom door and we went inside. Nighty Night wasn't there, of course. The officer took the clipboard out from under his arm and asked me a few questions, and I answered them as best as I could. He scribbled some notes on the paper as I spoke, seemingly satisfied with my responses. He then got down on one knee and examined the safety rail that ran along the side of Ian's bed.
"Have you done anything in this room since you brought your son into the hospital?"
the officer asked. I looked around to try to figure out what happened. I told him.
"Okay, but did you change the bed sheets or anything like that?"
What? No, I just moved things around and put them back. I didn't change the sheets. The officer nodded.
"Well, it looks like Mr. Eaton was right."
Mr. Eaton?
"The social worker assigned to your son. See here? There's no blood on the sheets, but there are 3 streaks along the safety rail. They match up to where the poles are on the rail. Mr. Eaton thinks that your son tried to get out of bed while he was still out of it and slid over the rail. He must have caught the poles just right through the fabric and they dug into him. Cute kid, by the way. He said that he was going nighty-night and that his back started feeling ouchy when he got out of bed. Eaton put things together from there."
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The theory was wrong, and Ian's words had been completely misinterpreted. The blood trails and the spacing on the rails were pure coincidence. It was all working completely in my favor, though.
"Good thing, too,"
he continued.
"If he hadn't figured it out, or if I had found anything to prove him wrong here, we'd be having a very different conversation right now."
Seemingly satisfied with everything, the officer left and went back to his car. I watched him through the window as he pulled out and headed down the street. The sun was starting to come up over the trees, and I could hear the family of robins in the front yard tree chirping. I decided that it was close enough to morning to go back to the hospital and get my son back. It went smoother than I had expected. The social worker had me fill out some quick paperwork so that they had my statements for the record, and after that, he led me to a patient room on the opposite side of the hospital. He had barely opened the door for me when Ian came running up to me barefoot with his little hospital gown waving behind him and practically jumped into my arms. He hugged me tightly and, being careful to avoid the white bandages covering his stitched cuts, I hugged him back. We stood there for what seemed like an eternity, me crying and him telling me all about his stay in the hospital. That was 2 months ago. The house that I raised Ian in is currently for sale, and my realtor tells me that there are a number of people interested, even though it hasn't been listed very long. A seller's market, she calls it. I've only been back twice since that night, once to pick up our clothes and other necessary items, and once to pack the remainder of our belongings and put them into storage. Both times were during the middle of the day, and each time I made arrangements for Ian to stay with someone instead of accompanying me. We've been living at a hotel on the other side of town. My long-term plan is for us to move far away, possibly all the way to the coast. I want to put as much distance between us and this place as possible. Last week, I read a newspaper article in the local paper about an officer that killed his wife. According to the report, he had said that he had just started to doze off one night when a giant monster appeared in his room. He grabbed the gun that he kept in his nightstand and fired off 5 shots at it. The monster disappeared, but his wife had been walking into the room at the time, and 2 bullets struck her, killing her almost instantly. No one believed him, of course. How could they possibly have? It was a ludicrous story. He seemed so convinced that he was telling the truth that a psychological evaluation was ordered before formal charges were filed. 3 days later, he was found dead in his cell. Not just dead, but damn near decapitated. The police are baffled. He was alone in his cell, and there was nothing he could have used to do that to himself. The guards think that the other prisoners got in and did the job. Former cops don't have a lot of friends in jail, after all. They're at a loss to explain just how a prisoner could have gotten into the cell and caused so much damage without alerting anyone. This was the same officer that had come to my house. I know what happened to him. It was the same thing that almost happened to both myself and my son. It was Nighty Night. I think that I've got the creature's appearing and disappearing act figured out. I was on the verge of becoming unconscious both times that I saw it. The first time I was almost asleep, and the second time I was trying not to pass out. When I actually did black out, it didn't harm me. The officer said in his statement that he was falling asleep when he saw the monster in his room. I think Nighty Night exists in that ever so brief moment between awake and asleep. When you enter into that moment, you can see it, and it can look right back at you. Or maybe I'm wrong and it's always there, watching and waiting until it can come for you in that short time where your world and its are connected. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I doubt that I ever will. Knowing exactly what Ian had gone through might provide more insight, but it doesn't matter. I refuse to ask him about it. He's sleeping through the night now that his wounds have mostly healed, and I'm not going to dredge up bad memories that could only hurt him. He deserves to be safe and protected from things, both natural and unnatural. He's been through enough already. I'm afraid that he is going to be through more before this is all over. Last night, I watched him sleeping on the bed in our hotel room. I started to drift off in the uncomfortable chair in the corner of the room. I was just about to when I heard something through the glass window to my right. It was faint, as if coming from quite a distance away, but I recognized it immediately. The raspy voice called out in the darkness.
Nighty Night.
I jerked awake and immediately stood up to start packing our things, being careful not to wake up Ian as I did so. He needed his rest. We were going to be on the road for a long, long time. My first memory of sleep paralysis happened when I was 10 years old. I remember because it was the night my parents took me to see Shrek 2 for getting good grades on my report card. It was an evening show, so we got home late and my mom tucked me straight into bed. It was around 4 a.m. when I woke up. The light from my alarm clock told me that much. I couldn't feel anything, not my pajamas against my skin or the warmth of my head against the pillow. I could feel my arms and legs, but they felt heavy, as if a great weight was holding them down. I tried to call out, but I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat, my lips unable to move. I mustered a weak groan that sounded like a cross between a frog's croak and a zombie's moan, but that was it. I thought I was dead, that this was what death feels like, being awake but unable to move or tell anyone. My mind wrestled with the idea of being placed in a coffin, unable to tell anyone I was still alive in here, unable to move or say anything as the lid closed and they put me in the ground, still alive. My fear subsided as I felt my heart thudding in my chest in response to my near panic attack. I also became aware of my breathing, which slowed as the fear subsided. I calmed a little, thinking it was just a dream. That was when I saw him for the first time, Mr. Brown Sticklegs. He huddled in the corner of the room by my closet. His two oversized red eyes glowed in the dark of my bedroom. His face was like a porcelain mask, white, expressionless, with no mouth or nose, only those two haunting red eyes. When he stood up, his body unfolded like origami until his head reached the ceiling. His neck bent, tilting forward as his true height was greater than the height of my room. His long black torso was covered in shimmering symbols that reflected red in the light of his glowing eyes. He stood on two spindly, thin legs that disappeared into the shadows of the room. He made no noise as he moved, seeming to glide as he hovered closer to my bed. His long, thin arms reached down to me as I moaned through paralyzed lips. I could not scream even though I very much wanted to. His fingers reaching through the darkness down to my face. Two pointed fingers touched against my eyelids, pushing them closed. I remember his fingertips feeling cool, but not cold. Even though the ends of his fingertips looked sharp, his touch was gentle.
Do not struggle, little one. Sleep, sleep.
His voice was so low I could feel it in my chest when he spoke. I did as instructed, convincing myself that it was indeed a dream, but even if it wasn't, the back of my eyelids were more reassuring than looking into those piercing red eyes in his vacant mask of a face. I closed my eyes, wanting it to be a dream, willing it to be a dream. I woke up the next morning, thankfully able to move, walk, and talk. I explained what I saw to my parents, who both agreed that it was a dream. My mom tried floating the idea that something from Shrek 2 scared me, but neither my dad or I bought it. For confirmation, Dad asked that I draw a picture of what I saw for them. As I was drawing, I ran out of black crayon and had to finish his legs with the next darkest color in the crayon box. "Hey there, Mr. Brown Sticklegs," my dad said as I handed him the drawing. "You leave my son alone now, you hear?" This is how my sleep paralysis demon ended up with the name Mr. Brown Sticklegs. Giving him a silly name helped take some of the edge off of going to bed the following night. My dad even did a sweep of the room, calling out for him. "Here, Mr. Brown Sticklegs," he said, whistling as if he were calling a dog. It made me giggle, and the whole episode felt more fun than scary. But once they tucked me in and turned off the light, I felt the dread creeping back in. Darkness hits harder when you expect to find something lurking in the shadows. I don't know how long I searched, but I eventually fell asleep. In the weeks following, I searched for Mr. Brown Sticklegs every night as I fell asleep. Even when I went to sleepovers, I would do a cursory check in case he tagged along to a friend's house. As time passed, my searches became less frequent. It was a couple months later, the night before my first day of 5th grade, when I woke up to Mr. Brown Sticklegs straddled over my bed, his empty plate of a face inches from my own. A scream stuck in my throat, coming out sounding like a gush of air releasing from a pool float.
Hush, child,
he said. His voice was deep. I didn't know how he spoke without a mouth, but I heard him nonetheless. I saw that he held a piece of paper in his thin fingers, crumpled on the edges and torn. He held it up to show me. On the page was a pink blob with blue dots for eyes and a droll red smile with stick lines for legs and arms. It was lying on a blue rectangle.
I found this picture you drew of me, so I drew a picture of you. Do you like it?
I tried nodding, but I couldn't move. I tried answering, but all that came out was the same dry croaking sound.
Will you draw another one for me? I so liked the first one. You gave me pants. I look good in pants.
Again, I was unable to respond or move to give him an answer. He must have been able to read my intent, because he tucked the picture under my pillow before closing my eyes again. When I woke up the following morning, I bolted upright and tossed my pillow off the bed. My heart leapt into my throat when I found the picture. It wasn't a dream. He was real. I went to my desk and began drawing a picture for him, starting with his face and eyes, trying to capture as much detail as I could remember. I had forgotten all about the first day of school until my mom opened the door and found me still in my pajamas.
Lex,
Your bus will be here in less than an hour. Get dressed now.
Startling me as I was coloring in his eyes. I tucked my picture into my school backpack and got dressed. I finished my drawing at recess that day, using my brand new Crayola 64 pack that I got with my back-to-school supplies. I gave him blue pants this time, figuring he'd like to see himself in jeans. I wrote his name, Mr. Brown Sticklegs, at the bottom of the picture and drew a smiley face next to it, hoping he'd like his nickname. I flipped the paper over to write him a message on the back. I wanted to ask him questions, but didn't want to anger him since he visited me when I was at my most vulnerable. I wrote out my letter on a separate piece of paper before copying it over to the back of my picture. Mr. Brown Sticklegs, that's your name. My name is Lex. I am in the 5th grade. What's your name? How old are you? Do you go to school? Why do you visit my bedroom? Why can't I move when you visit? You look scary, but you also seem nice. I hope we can be friends. Love, Lex. P.S. I hope you like your blue pants. I added another smiley face at the end of the letter, my final emphasis on wanting to be friends. I considered closing it with sincerely, but I figured love was a better, friendlier choice. I tucked the picture under my pillow that night, now anxious to see him rather than filled with dread of his reappearance. But, like the last time, he did not return the next day, or the day after. The days stretched into weeks, and every morning I found the picture tucked under my pillow from the night before. It wasn't until Thanksgiving break that I saw him again. My eyes opened as the morning sun poked through the blinds of my bedroom. His body didn't look any different in the light. In fact, his black skin seemed darker, absorbing the sun rays without giving anything back. His eyes seemed wider than before. If he had a mouth, I would have figured he was smiling. In his slender fingers was the picture I drew for him.
Hello, Lex. Thank you for the picture. I do look good in blue pants.
I wanted to smile, but, well, sleep paralysis. He flipped the picture over to the side with my letter.
I will answer your questions as best I can. I do not have a name, not one you could ever pronounce, but I am happy for you to call me Mr. Brown Sticklegs. As for my age, I exist outside of the construct of time. Therefore, I am ageless. I do not go to school, nor do I know what school is. How do I visit you? I visit to feed off the energy of your soul.
My breath quickened as a mute groan exited my teeth. I wanted to run, wanted to get away from him, but I was pinned down, unable to move. He sensed my uneasiness and tried to calm me by patting my forehead.
Let me explain. Have you been to the ocean? It appears vast, almost limitless as you stare out into the blue water, with no visible land on the other side.
In my mind, I was standing on a beach. I felt the salty ocean breeze against my face as I looked over the massive body of water. The waves crashed at my feet. I felt the rush of water over them, followed by the trickle of sand and pebbles as the water drew back.
Your soul is like an ocean, child. Vast, limitless, undefinable by words to your understanding. I take only a tiny sip, a single glass of water from a vast ocean. I am not one who could consume an entire ocean.
Dark clouds formed over the water as I stared at the white-capped waves. The clouds unleashed a heavy downpour, turning the horizon gray as rain fell from the sky over the ocean.
Just as the rain falls over the ocean, your soul can replenish itself by more than I could ever consume. Not even in 1,000 of your years. Does that make you feel better?
On the beach, in my mind's vision, I nodded. In my bedroom, he nodded back to me.
Good. As for your last question, why you cannot move, we are meeting at a point outside of your time, where your world and mine touch. Your physical body cannot move here, but if you persist, you can learn to speak to me with your mind, and I will answer your questions in exchange for your drawings. You can draw pictures of whatever you like. I want to know more of your world.
In my mind, I nodded again.
This knowledge is a gift so we can understand one another more. I am not one who would hurt you.
He pressed his fingertips to my eyes again, closing them. In my mind's eye, I was still on the beach, but the sun was setting and no stars were visible through the rain. I drifted back to sleep to the sound of falling rain. The next morning, I asked my parents for a sketchbook and colored pencils. They tried to hold me off until Christmas, but since I spent most of my afternoons and weekends drawing pictures up in my room, Dad let me open one of my gifts a week early, a Strathmore sketchbook with 100 pages and a 50-pack crayon of Crayola-colored pencils. I started by drawing the rest of my family, Mom, Dad, and my little brother Tommy, our cat Libby, and even though he had died, our dog Pancakes. Next, I drew our house, then our car, then my school. I kept drawing anything I could think of, trees, birds, insects, until my sketchbook was full. I used my allowance to purchase more books so I could keep drawing. I honed my craft, redoing my earlier drawings in greater detail. My thoughts, considering his wording. I am not one who could consume an entire ocean. I wanted to ask him if there were those who could, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to know such things. Mr. Brown Sticklegs didn't return until my freshman year of high school. To him, it wasn't like any time had passed. I read up on lucid dreaming in the time between visits so that when he returned, I would be better capable of talking to him. He held my book in his hands, flipping through my drawings and doting over the increased refinement of my drawing skills. I had filled a dozen sketchbooks and upgraded from Crayola to Prismacolor Premier pencils for my drawing. His biggest surprise was when, after he complimented my drawings, I spoke to him. "Thank you," I said, seeing the words in my mind as I spoke them aloud. If he had a surprised expression, his eyes showed it.
You have been very busy, child. Do you have any questions you would like to ask?
I hesitated, but finally formed the words in my mind. Are there creatures who can consume an entire ocean? He didn't respond right away, which made me think I had not asked properly. I asked him a second time. He put a finger to my lips as if to shush me.
There are those who can. They are known as the Dark Ones. They are capable of consuming entire souls, emptying them out, leaving them dry and barren. You should not fear them, but you should also not provoke them.
His eyes curved downward, as if concerned or afraid. What do they look like? I asked. In my mind, my visions were filled with images of great, terrible creatures, spiders taller than the Empire State Building on thin, spindly legs of shadow and smoke, tentacled monsters in the seas, lofting blue whales like they were toys, ripping them to shreds with their curved chitinous beaks, great, ghastly flying creatures that knocked over orchards and forests with the beat of their leathery wings.
I showed you only because you asked,
Mr. Brown Sticklegs said.
But it is best that we don't talk or think about them. Let them be.
I nodded in my mind. He leaned forward and pressed his plate-like face to my head, as if to kiss me on the forehead, which was odd since he didn't have a mouth. Then, as usual, he closed my eyes as I drifted back to sleep. My life took a downturn during the latter years of high school. My dad lost his job, and when the search for a new one dragged on, he turned to drinking to cope with his failure. He wasn't abusive, but he wasn't fun to be around either. In the months following, my parents would hush their arguing when I entered the room, greeting me with smiles as if nothing were wrong. That lasted until the day I came home from school to them fighting over a foreclosure notice from the bank. We moved out over the weekend from our home in the suburbs to an apartment on the other side of town. I internalized my feelings during that time. I withdrew from my friends and school activities besides the art club, the only one we could still afford. I saw my friends driving to school and hanging out while I rode the bus, too poor and too far out of the way to join in. My taste began to change as well. Out was the bubblegum pop I usually listened to, and instead I listened to Pierce the Veil, Sleeping with Sirens, and Bring Me the Horizon. My clothes changed as well, more black t-shirts and pants. My mom called it my goth phase, not that she understood. My drawings became darker too. I moved from colored pencils to charcoal, drawing skulls and gothic-looking cemeteries as my passion for drawing animals and flowers waned. I also drew the dark ones in great detail, exactly how I remembered them in my mind's eye. Mr. Brown Sticklegs visited me again a month after we moved into the apartment. He looked more at home in my room with blacklight posters and death metal bands than he did in my previous one, not the vibrant red as they were before. He stared at me as I lay in bed, unable to move. He moved inches from my face as I heard his words in my mind.
Your soul tastes different now.
He didn't speak of my drawings. I worried that he might, especially since I had been drawing the dark ones. Not only drawing them, but thinking about them and what type of damage they could do if they were to wake. He seemed sad for me, although reading his expression was difficult with no face. He patted my forehead like before, but didn't close my eyes before leaving as he used to. My life continued its spiraling path like a bottle rocket with a broken stick. My parents didn't talk outside of short conversations about which bills to pay and which ones to ignore. Each night, Dad disappeared into a bottle, while Mom disappeared online to chat with a Facebook friend she knew from high school. The thing about rock bottom is that it's often a disguise for a trap door that drops you to an even lower depth than you thought possible. The first bottom came when my father died, drove off the road into a gravel pit late at night with an empty bottle of bourbon in the passenger seat. I cried, but it felt hollow. I felt hollow. Even when Mom tried to hold me, I felt nothing inside. Not sadness, not guilt, not anything. I disappeared into my sketchbooks, drawing even darker, more disturbing images. Death, dismemberment, vividly accurate vivisections of the cute animals I used to enjoy drawing. My friends no longer talked to me, which was fine because I didn't want to talk to them anymore anyways. I found people to hang out with. Not friends, but people who could get me access to moments of chemically induced euphoria to forget about life for a while. And just like that, the trapdoor opened, dropping me to a new rock bottom of addiction. One thing I had in common with my dad, but instead of falling into a bottle, I fell into a needle. I stole money from my mom's purse to feed my habits, not that she noticed. She was busy with her old Facebook friend who had moved from online acquaintance to nightly sleepover companion. When the time came to begin my senior year, I didn't bother going back. I kept drawing, filling entire sketchbooks with the dark images that reflected my bleak outlook on life. The dark ones were prevalent subjects during this period of my life. I drew them feasting on humanity, raking flesh from bone in their jagged teeth behind lips of smoke. I came home one night to find my mom and her new male friend in the middle of a fight. It was different from her fights with Dad, more violent, more physical. When he raised his hand at me for trying to intervene, I decided it was time to bolt. I left home, hitching rides with anyone with a set of wheels I could manage to put up with for short periods of time. My preference leaned toward those with access to the chemical release I craved. The more I could numb, the more I could escape. I found certain drug combinations had similar effects to sleep paralysis, where my mind's ability to control my body's actions became severed. In those moments of numbed paralysis, I'd see Mr. Brown Sticklegs watching from afar as I dulled the pain. I saw what I perceived as the dark ones too, but they weren't hiding in the shadows like Mr. Brown Sticklegs did. They were the shadows. I called out to them as well, for in those moments I wanted nothing more than to be hollowed out and empty, a void so dark no pain could ever penetrate it. When they didn't answer, I called out to Mr. Brown Sticklegs, but he would vanish every time. Perhaps it was all just a drug-fueled hallucination. Overdosing was never my intention. I was pushing too much, trying to find the edge of the void after feeling so low, so very low. Searching for that something extra to filter out the background noise. I took it too far, giving myself a near-lethal dose. At one moment I was lying next to strangers on a stained mattress in an abandoned warehouse. Then came the initial rush of euphoric bliss, and then nothing. Whoever I was traveling with at the time dumped me on the curb in front of an ER, making me someone else's problem. This was my rock bottom moment, although at the time it felt more like freefall. I spent 3 weeks in a coma. I was aware of my surroundings and could hear the doctors and nurses as they checked my vitals and tended to my cleanliness and upkeep, but I couldn't move or sleep. At the end of my 3rd week in the ICU on an incubator, I looked up to find Mr. Brown Sticklegs hovering over me, his round red eyes peering through the darkness.
What have you done to yourself, child?
His voice spoke inside my mind. In my mind, I was beside him, standing in the middle of a vast salt-flat desert. The ground was cracked and dry in a hexagonal pattern that stretched in all directions. This is your soul now. There is nothing left to drink. I heard the beep of my heart monitor back in my hospital room speed up as fear entered my mind. I called out to the Dark Ones. I asked for them to come. They emptied me out, emptied my soul.
No, child. You did this. You have not replenished, you have only consumed, and now nothing remains.
I dropped to my knees in the middle of the salt as I felt a rumbling deep inside the hollow pit of my stomach. I leaned forward onto my arms, but they were no longer my arms. They were pitch black and empty. I could feel them, but when I looked at them, they were empty voids of smoke and shadow. I stood up on my legs, but they were no longer my legs. The darkness swirled up my torso and down my arms. The emptiness inside me consumed my entire body until only my head remained. What's happening to me? I heard a snap as my arms and legs split, forming 8 black, spindly, thin legs. I collapsed onto them, unable to support myself. Mr. Brown Sticklegs glided down in front of my face, his eyes inches from my own.
As I told you, child, only the Dark Ones have the ability to consume an entire ocean of a soul. That is your fate. That is what you will become.
Back in my room, my heart monitor crashed to a flat line. I felt the cold darkness swirl up my neck to my head as the void consumed me. All I felt was the cold consuming what was left of me. Help me, I uttered. Please! My physical body jolted from the electrical paddles, but I felt nothing. Only the cold darkness. A needle injected into my IV line as they recharged for another burst of electricity. Still, I felt nothing. Only cold, only darkness, only the vast emptiness of the void. Mr. Brown Sticklegs tilted his head as he stared through his unblinking red eyes. He leaned forward, pressing his plate-like face to my forehead. I felt a vibration against my skin, followed by the tingling sensation of heat returning. The darkness receded back down my arms and legs. As he pulled back, the red in his eyes had diminished.
A gift for the boy who gave me pants.
A tear formed in my eye. It rolled down my cheek and fell onto the parched landscape below. Before I could say anything, an electric jolt coursed through my body, pulling me away from the salt-flat expanse and back into my hospital room. The sinus rhythm of my heart monitor returned to normal. I felt the cool gel of the defibrillator paddles against my chest. I remember squeezing the hand of one of the attending nurses who smiled down at me. Look who's awake. I cried, but it was different than before. I felt the pain I had long been avoiding, but I felt something else as well. I felt grateful, and I felt a sense of hope I hadn't known in a long time. It was a long road back from the darkness, but the thing about the road to recovery is that, like a road, it leads to a destination. After years of listless drifting towards the void, having a destination was an important first step in finding self-love. I reconnected with my mother, who was struggling with her own form of the darkness. We leaned on one another, talking and going to therapy as we worked through the issues that drove us apart. After my release from the hospital, I moved back home with her. Her Facebook friend was long gone. I got my GED and used my many sketchbooks as a portfolio to get an apprenticeship at a tattoo parlor. I've been clean for 4 years now, and it feels good to smile again. Granted, I still prefer Pierce the Veil to anything from Katy Perry's catalog, and my tattoos and jewelry have more skulls than fluffy bunnies, but that's all on the surface. I no longer crave the darkness to consume me. I often think about the vision with Mr. Brown Sticklegs on the salt flats that night in the hospital. I've not seen him since that night, and I often wonder about the state of my soul since that day. Has it been replenished, or is it still the dried-up, barren wasteland that he took me to on that night? Last night, around 3 in the morning, I finally got my answer. I woke up with a heaviness on my chest, arms, and legs. At first, I felt the grips of fear grappling hold, much like the first time I experienced it. But then, in the dark corner of my room, I saw glowing red eyes staring back at me from the shadows. In spite of my sleep paralysis, I couldn't help but smile when I heard his voice call out to me.
Child, your soul tastes much better now.
I used to think of hell as a faraway place. For those of you out there who still hold that belief, this piece of my life is for you. Don't ask me why I'm doing this, I'm honestly not sure. My therapist says writing about our traumas can help our brains cope, make things easier to swallow. A system he affectionately refers to as remedy writing. My reasoning could be something as selfish as that. Perhaps I'm also hoping that those of you who hear this will heed its warning. Do not make the same mistakes my 10-year-old self did, or maybe it's merely the adage, misery loves company. I grew up in a middle-class suburb in Ventura County, not too far from Los Angeles. Our house was one of many cookie-cutter homes separated by white pickets or chain-link fences. My mom, a soft-spoken, dream-driven woman, worked from home as an editor for a growing magazine. My father spent every day in Simi Valley, where he worked as a cargo loader for trucks. After days of lifting, managing the forklift, and meeting every physical demand, he'd come home sore and irritable. I remember eagerly staring at the clock, watching it tick revoltingly slower every time I checked. Then came the magical chime that sounded our freedom. Summer break had started, and school finally released us from our desk shackles. I think I miss that most about childhood. The raw, unfettered excitement I had for things. The sort of overwhelming avidity that kept you awake at night just waiting to look under the Christmas tree, just waiting to see your birthday cake, just waiting for a brand new day. We eventually lose it as adults, once the day-to-day exhaustion and cynicism set in. With summer came many things that have permanently crystallized in my memories. The smell of backyard barbecues, the giddy laughter of kids running through sprinklers while their parents gossip on the porch, the golden bar of sunset slowly sinking down the street. And of course, how could we forget the ballad of a summer heat wave, the ice cream man's jingle? That was how it all started. It was on a warm Wednesday night. An awful gnawing hunger pulled me out of sleep. Unable to ignore it, I slipped out of bed and crept past my parents' bedroom. I was craving something sweet from the kitchen. Settling on the last of our pudding cups, I also poured myself a small glass of milk. It would be enough to shut my stomach up. As I started back to my room, a faint sound caught my ear. A song, like the one you'd hear drifting out of a music box, was coming from outside. I walked to the window and peered through it. The muffled tune, more specifically, Pop Goes the Weasel, was coming from down the street. An ice cream truck. I'd never seen Mr. Mason out this late before. He was one of the residents of our neighborhood who decked out his gray van to sell frozen treats, but he usually started his route at noon when the sun was at its cruelest. Maybe it's for adults, my 10-year-old brain thought. The truck coasted by my house, moving tantalizingly slow with that happy electronic chime. It wasn't Mr. Mason's van. The truck was a pale green with blue accents on the lower half. On the side of its metal body was a large circle with the print of a cartoonish boy in the center. He had blue skin, big black eyes, and a white soft-serve hairstyle. His pupils were notched to create the illusion of a glare on his smiling, Looney Tune face. One of his white-gloved hands held a fudgesicle to his mouth, while the other gave a thumbs up. The tip of the swollen thumb, as well as the fingers and wrists, appeared to be melting, just like ice cream. Written above and below the circle, in sizable, whimsical lettering, "Piper's Popsicles, join the fun." That next morning is still such a vivid memory for me. I remember waking up to my father's fist pounding against my door. He was yelling, ordering me to unlock it. I pulled the bedsheets over my head and curled into a ball. Even now, I can still feel that sharp tinge of anxiety just thinking about it. Then, from behind the doorframe, a countdown started from 3. You never wanted him to reach 0. God help you if that man ever reached 0. When I opened the door, he snatched my arm and pulled me into the kitchen. My bare feet dragged pitifully across the floor. The white milk jug was sitting on the corner, its cap still missing. Mom was still sitting at the table, her neck deliberately facing the window. Not a good sign.
"Did you leave this out?"
he asked with a sullen voice. When I didn't give an immediate answer, he twisted my arm. A hot ring of pain coiled around the area.
"Yes!"
I cried out.
"I'm sorry. I left it out. I'm sorry." "Great."
His voice rose and cracked.
"Now we need more milk. What a fucking waste."
With one of his hands still clasped around my arm, he reached for the milk jug with the other and dumped it over my head. My mom gasped loudly in her seat, the trademark reaction. He left for work after that. Evidently, I had made him late. It wasn't the first of my father's outbursts, and it was far from the last. The bastard was always looking for a punching bag, and when my mother didn't fit the role, I was runner-up. Every day in that house was like maneuvering around tripwire. Eventually, you'd trigger him. My mom scooped me off the floor and took me to the bathroom so I could wash the milk out of my hair. She left me a bundle of clean clothes on my bed. That was her time to react, the moment our front door slammed shut and his car left the driveway. Until then, her neck was twisted around somewhere else with that same disconnected, faraway look. When I came back into the kitchen, she was making eggs for breakfast.
What kept you up last night?
She quietly asked me. I was hungry. I was gonna put everything back, but the ice cream truck distracted me. She looked at me quizzically, the blistering hot oil popping in the pan.
What do you mean?
He was driving around the neighborhood last night. Didn't you hear the music? She scrunched her forehead and shook her head.
Mr. Mason wouldn't be driving around that late. There wouldn't be any point to it. All he would get is no customers and noise complaints. The sweets you ate before bed probably made you dream about it.
If only that were the case. That night, my stomach once again woke me. The hunger pangs had come back much worse this time. As much as I tossed and turned, trying my best to ignore it, it was impossible. I sighed and pulled myself out of bed, once again tiptoeing past my parents' bedroom. The kitchen had nothing for me, not even milk now. My mom still hadn't been to the store that week, leaving our pantry mostly vacant, save for larger meals. I wanted something sweet. Then it came again, the melodious music from outside. The ice cream truck was driving its late-night route again. Another sharp twinge stabbed at my stomach. The thought of ice cream at that moment was captivating. If the driver were following the same pattern as last night, he'd pass right by here, right? The idea teased me. I weighed my options. The piggy bank in my room had at least $2 or $3 of change in it. I could run out, pay him, grab the ice cream, and run back with my folks none the wiser. But if my father noticed, dear God, if he saw, I'd have a lot more than hunger pains to fall asleep to. I stood there and pondered. Eventually, hunger won the debate. I went into my room and opened up my piggy bank. The mechanical jingle was getting closer. It was nearly passing the yard. I put on my shoes and wrapped a jacket over my pajamas. Carefully, I unlocked the front door, praying that the click wouldn't be too loud. I discreetly pulled it open, just enough for my small self to slip through. Luckily, not enough for the hinges to creak. I ran across the grass and down the driveway in my sneakers. There it was, steering slowly toward me. The song churning out of the speakers situated at its top sounded similar to It's a Small World. It pulled up and stopped near me. The cartoon caricature with bright blue skin, presumably named Piper, smiled down at me. Behind the hum of its engine, I heard something suddenly click inside the truck. The music stopped, and someone hoisted open the vendor window. I tried to look inside, but there wasn't a single light or bulb to light up the interior. It was just a metal box of darkness. "Hello?" I called out. "Hello, little guy." The cheery voice that answered was soft and mellow, definitely not Mr. Mason's smoker rasp. "What can I get for you?" I shuffled the quarters in my palm. "Can I have a bomb pop?" "You sure can," the chipper voice answered. Inside the shadows, there were vague signs of movement and quiet humming. The sweet-smelling aromas of hot fudge mixed with other milky flavors created an amalgam of smells that made my stomach growl. A white-gloved hand melted out of the blackness. Tweezed between its index finger and thumb was my popsicle, still in its wrapper. I took it and held my handful of quarters out to the serving window. "Oh, no, the man said. "Not necessary. This one is on me, free of charge." I smiled and pocketed the coins. Thank you." I beamed and cocked my head to the side. "Can you see anything in there?" "I see everything," the voice chortled. "Where are your friends?" I scuffed the curb with one of my soles. "They're probably asleep. Everyone is. Why do you drive around so late?" "Well, I was born sick, you see. The type of sick that makes me sensitive to the sun. If even the slightest bit touches me, I'd whistle, I'd whiz, and then I'd whoop, like a firework." We both laughed at that. From within the lightless interior, I could make out a vague face with perked, smiling cheeks. "Would you like another popsicle?" he asked. I itched the back of my neck. I should go now. If my dad sees me out here, I'll get in trouble." "Oh." He sounded disappointed. "We wouldn't want that. Drop by again, okay? Bring some friends next time." I will." I smiled and waved as I carried my free popsicle back to the house. The door quietly closed behind me. My parents didn't hear a thing. On my way back to my room, I peered out the window. The ice cream truck was still out there, sitting motionless in front of my house. Finally, the wheels started turning, and the music began a new chorus of Home on the Range. I ate the tri-colored popsicle in my room. The flavor that tingled over my tongue was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that words will not do it justice, but I'll do my best. It was a beautiful mixture of cherry, lime, raspberry, and something else, something different. It was like a literal rocket had propelled itself through my system and left a sputtering trail of joy. Each bite only brought me to a higher atmosphere. It was fantastic, enjoyable, and worst of all, unnatural. I slept like a baby that night with a more than satisfied stomach. The next day, I biked around our neighborhood with a few other kids. We had chosen a miserably hot day for it and quickly regretted the decision. Luckily, we found a large tree and sat with our bikes in its cool shadow. "Have you guys heard it too? The ice cream truck at night?" I asked everyone. They shook their heads, trading off skeptical looks at me, except for one boy, Matthew. He was pudgy, wore a pair of square-lensed glasses that complemented his round face, and had cheeks splattered with freckles. We weren't close friends, but mostly knew each other from school. "I've seen it parked right outside my house," was his tepid response. "The guy waved at me from the window. I thought it would wake my mom up, but she slept like a boulder." Before I could answer him, it was as though the devil himself had heard our chatter, and we heard the music. Mr. Mason's ice cream van rounded the corner, blasting the first few bars of its tinny melody. That was just what we needed right now, the perfect solution for a brutal summer day. Ever since the bomb pop from last night, I'd been craving another. My thoughts kept returning to it, the lingering flavors still flickering in my mouth. I was almost drooling. I wanted more. Mr. Mason quickly spotted us and pulled up with a smile. He spoke in a grizzled, unique voice, which I now realize was a thick Turkish accent. He spoke in a grizzled, unique voice. I handed him the change in my pocket and waited for the wondrous rocket-shaped popsicle. The moment I grasped it, I immediately tore the wrapper off and sunk my teeth into it. Then, just as quickly, I stopped and gagged. It was bitter, just like I had taken a bite out of frozen wax. The taste covered my tongue and clawed the back of my throat. I let each of my friends have a lick, except for Matthew, who immediately declined. They all said it tasted normal, not sharp or waxy at all. My friend, who had asked for the same thing, even let me try his. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. None of them could taste it, the disgusting flavor. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and shaking. The pulsing red numbers next to my bed read 2 a.m. My eyes were red and swollen from hours of crying. Pain laced the purple, pear-shaped bruise on my leg, a reminder, courtesy of my father, that after a grueling day of work, he did not deserve to come home to a bike left in the driveway. It would unfortunately be another 9 years of this before the untreated blood clot in his leg would take his life. But my father wasn't the reason I couldn't stop shaking. It was the cravings, the throbbing spasms of hunger that had been haunting me for the past few nights. They were back with a twisting vengeance, worse than ever. After Mr. Mason had given me the popsicle, I'd spent the rest of the day trying to get rid of that vile taste. Nothing was working. In fact, every sweet thing I tried tasted just as bad. Even my favorite juice was developing a sharp, greasy aftertaste. I bit deeply into my knuckles, a nervous habit I'd acquired over the years, which has now left a row of callous depressions there. I needed something sweet. I'd have killed for something sweet. Then it returned. The music outside my window, just down the street. The late-night ice cream truck was making its rounds. That was it, the answer to my prayers. Without thinking, I sprang out of bed and grabbed my jacket and sneakers, slipping out of the house just as easily as the first time. Mostly fueled by hunger, I ran to meet the truck halfway. It rolled to a stop, clearly spotting me. Not that I was hard to miss, of course. I ran next to its minty green body and impatiently waited. But nothing happened. "Hey, kiddo," the voice said through the open passenger window. "Sorry about that. My hatch is stuck and won't open. What can I get for you?" Another bomb pop, please," I asked pitifully. Hiding the pleading whine in my voice was impossible. "Not a problem. Let's have a look-see." I could hear him rummaging around, muttering incoherently to himself. He returned, sounding less than cheerful. "Well, that isn't good." My heart sank like an anchor. "What isn't?" "Well, it looks like I'm all out of those for the night. Dang, what bad luck." A painful throb racked my stomach, making me wince. Something else?" I begged. "Can I have something else?" He rummaged around some more and sighed heavily. "I'm sorry to say, but it looks like I have nothing left." Tears rushed to my eyes. Hopelessness bubbled up inside me. My solution, the one sure thing I needed to get rid of these cravings, was gone. I'd have to wait until tomorrow night. I started the miserable walk home, back to the bed I knew I wouldn't be able to fall asleep in. My sneakers dragged along the asphalt. "Hang on a tad," the voice said. "Looks like I have one more left, just for you." I whipped back around and raced to the passenger window. "Really?" I said, wiping the trailing tears from my face.
Of course.
I heard something unlock. The passenger door. "I found it right up here. Come and get it." A chorus of alarmed voices called out to my brain. Not safe. This is a stranger. Go home. Not safe. Of course, there were red flags, obvious ones, but I was not thinking clearly. My logic had whittled away. All that mattered was the craving, the unusual desire for that exquisite taste. It possessed me. I knew there were risks, but my fatigued boyish mind was done compromising. I pulled the green metal door open. The cabin was expectantly as dark as its backside. An invisible coldness permeated the air, about as cold as you'd presume an ice cream truck to be. The tart, dancing smells of chocolate, strawberry, bubblegum, and other flavors graced my nose. A single grated step led inside. I spied a vague silhouette sitting at the driver's seat with my bomb pop in hand. From atop his dashboard, the bobblehead of a gray cat jiggled its head. "Go on, it's all yours," he said pleasantly. I leaned inside the truck, planting one foot over the metallic step while the other remained on the pavement. The dim outline of the driver held out the popsicle, just inches from my fingers. "Come on," he said again. "Don't you want it?" Just as my fingertips grazed the foil casting, I heard something that without a doubt saved my life that night. A strained voice squeaked out of the truck's insides. "Help me." The hand holding the popsicle lunged at me, seizing my arm as I tried to pull back, grabbing a handful of sleeve instead of skin. I gasped, too shocked to muster a scream, and jerked backwards, but his grip was relentless. The darkness around us dispersed, and in an instant, I could see everything, like some veil had lifted. A nauseating texture coated the ceiling, rust perhaps. It crawled down the inner walls in a reddish-brown crust. There were scuff marks on the strained floor, a foul, eggy smell that thickened the air. Every window was impossible to see through, smeared with grime and networking cracks. But the worst of all, the crux of my persistent nightmares even now, was the thing in the driver's seat. A naked, bluish body mottled with dark rashes and boils. Folds of excess skin sagged off of its bloated frame, almost like it was melting. One of its long, double-jointed arms was pulling at my sleeve. The loose flesh that hung off of it wobbled and jiggled like sacks of trapped liquid. And then its face, the horrible, horrible face, was creased with a clownish smile. Its gums were gray and infected with bent teeth jutting out of them. It looked bald at first glance, but a few straggly white hairs sprouted from its swollen blue scalp. One of its eyes, a pitch-black sphere, was rotted in its cheek, like it had slid down from the socket. The only thing remotely human about the thing was the way it sat in the driver's seat, one ugly hand on the steering wheel, the other still trying to pull me closer. A guttural voice spat out of its mouth at a sickeningly cheery octave. "Don't you want it, little guy?" I screamed and didn't stop screaming. The sanity drained out of me in fat, seeping tears. My vision was a wet, blurry haze of horror, and internal voices screamed for me to run, run, run. Suddenly, something was ripping. I flung myself back onto the asphalt. My sleeve was now a bloodless gash of torn fabric. The nude humanoid thing was exerting a strange huffing, gurgling sound. Maybe laughter? I don't care to know for sure. The outside of the truck was even worse than the inside. Eating away at the pale green paint was a thick film of black matter. It covered the car in a black, muddy ooze, smothering the cartoonish boy in his broad smile. A few letters did show through, though. Join the fun. Parts of the grimy substance were moving, throbbing maybe, as though they had some sort of pulse. The speakers atop its mucky body, although caked in the stuff, were still spewing out sound. It wasn't music, not in any way the human mind could understand. A hollow, high-pitched frequency with a gravelly white noise hiss. Behind the corrupted pitch was something else, something that almost sounded like it was trying to escape from it. A choppy, inaudible screaming. Hell. I was hearing hell. With the last burst of adrenaline my system had to offer, I twisted around and tore through the yard to reach my house. I flung the door open, slammed it shut, and slid down to the floor. I buried my head in the crevice of my knees, drenched in snot and tears. I sat there wallowing for some time, waiting for my father's footsteps to come pounding out of his room, but it never happened. Both my parents were still in bed. I tried to wake my mother up, and out of pure desperation, my father too, but neither so much as stirred. The gritty white noise was still screaming from the street. I hid beneath my sheets and covered my ears, trying everything I could to expel it from my head. "Help me," the distressed voice had said from the back of the truck. The voice that saved my life. Finally, after minutes of grueling torture, the truck revved its engine and cruised down the street. The house became silent, save for my sleepless crying. A child did go missing that night. Matthew, the boy with freckled cheeks and square lenses. I will not be giving out his name for respect of the family. His parents had woken up to his empty room and their front door left ajar. They called the police and filed a missing persons report, and the community was notified about the disappearance. I remember seeing a few police cruisers lined outside Mr. Mason's house, probably because the boy's mother heard him spout off about an ice cream truck coming in the dead of night. They found no evidence against him, but the gray ice cream van didn't leave his garage for the rest of summer, or any summer after that. To this day, I can still feel those bitter flavors in my mouth, sitting on my tongue like a pool of chemicals. At first, it only affected sweet things, then salty things, and slowly worked its way up to everything. No matter what I eat, no matter what I drink, my stomach attempts to force it out of my body due to its acrid waxiness. I take no pleasure in food. I eat only not to die. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed something as simple as taste. Every night a new wave of impulses come back, prying at the last cardboard walls of my sanity. I cram my knuckles into my teeth to trap the screams inside. I beg the dark nothingness of my room for something sweet. That's how it draws you out. Hunger. When the happy, inviting music gets in your head, it fills you with cravings masquerading as hunger. Don't bother trying to wake your parents. It won't work. Not while that truck is in your neighborhood. Then you take the bait, the incredible flavor from your dreams, a taste so perfect you'd kill for a sliver of it again. But when you go back, begging for just one more, it takes you. So, I implore you, whether or not you decide to believe me after hearing this, at least give it some thought. If you are ever stirred awake in the dead of night and an ice cream truck's jingle drifts in from the window, go back to sleep. For the love of God, go back to sleep. It took me a week to find where you keep your Wi-Fi password. A whole week. I was really worried you'd thrown it away, but lo and behold, there it was in the cutlery drawer of all places. Everything about the way you organize things confuses me. I guess because you live on your own now, you just put things any old place. I know there was someone else before. I heard you talking about him on the phone. Johnny, I think. Jimmy? Anyway, I know because you said it was tough being alone, but you're not alone, of course. You have me. There's a crack in your roof where I can see down onto the street below. Don't worry about the roof, by the way. Yes, it's pretty cramped, but I like my spaces small. I've actually stuffed a few things up here that make it smaller, just bits and bobs from recycling. I don't think you'll miss them. I can sit with my face against the wall and see down onto the street. That's where I saw you meeting up with all those people wearing black. It would have been weird anyway because you never meet anyone, but they were all rubbing your back and holding your hand and stuff. I was scared you were going to bring them in, but you just went off together, so that was okay. I don't know what I would have done if the house had filled up with people. You know, it really explains a lot that there was someone else before me. Like the fact you have 2 sets of drawers in your bedroom, or how you're living in such a big house all by yourself, and do weird things like leave the Wi-Fi in the cutlery drawer, or watch the same TV show all day on a weekend. I'm not one to talk, mind. I'm addicted to my toys. Like the big lump of blue tack I found a while back, which is great fun to fiddle with, but doesn't taste too good. Or the cigarette lighter that's fun to flick on and off, or the tube that has all the patterns in you can change. I could look down at that thing for hours. I often have. That's what I normally do when you're home. Or I'd just sit back and listen to you do the washing or run a shower or something like that. I crawl up the walls and hang there with my ears to the pipes and listen to the water rushing by. That kind of thing makes me happy. Plus, you never have anyone around, so once I got your schedule memorized, I could move around pretty free. I know what we have is a symbiotic relationship. That means you help me by giving me a warm place to stay and Wi-Fi, and I help you by eating all the spiders. Of course, there's no need to thank me. I fell asleep under the towels in your airing cupboard once, before I found the roof, and I saw you trying to get rid of one that was living under your sink with a broom. I've never seen so much ridiculous fuss in my entire life. But it makes no difference to me how many legs something has, so I just eat them up whenever I find one, and any other thing that makes its way into the house without permission. Aside from myself, of course. Since I only pay rent in spiders, I try to keep things I take to a minimum, but I can't say I feel too bad about stealing your socks. You have so many socks. Why would one girl need so many? I get a lot more out of them than you do, anyway. I like to take them apart by the threads and then wrap all the threads around my fingers and pull them tight till the tips go purple. I can nibble my own fingertips and not feel a thing. It's pretty great. I try not to take too much food either. I found I can usually survive off the things you leave out or throw away. Why don't you eat banana skins? It's another habit of yours that confuses me a lot. I like to open up my mouth all the way and drop them in whole, no chewing. I've never needed too much food to get by. I really like butter, though. Not to eat so much as just to play with. You once left the block out by the window in the sun and it went all melty while you were at work, so I sort of started playing with it. Once I'd stuck my fingers in it once, it was kind of hard to stop. I had it looking like a puddle by the end. But then I realized it was 5 and you'd be home soon, so I had to press it back into the rectangle as best I could. But then I heard you opening the doors. Boy, I was so startled. I went into the cupboard under the stairs, you know, the one you never go in as it's full of men's shoes and coats and things. And I watched you come in through the doorway. But then came the weird part. You didn't even notice the butter. All you did was make a cup of tea and then give up halfway through and start crying. Then you ordered a Chinese and barely ate any before throwing it away. You see what I mean about your habits? I'm sorry, but it's just weird. Sometimes if I'm having a bad night, I like to get under your bed while you're asleep. It's nice because I can hear you breathing, and then I can match my breathing up with that. I lie there for ages, gasping in and out, and if you get up for the bathroom or anything, I have to go completely still and hold my breath. I don't know why I do it. I guess it's fun. You're the first person whose company I've ever enjoyed. You cooked dinner the other evening. I noticed because you played music, which you never do, and you made something which took almost an hour and a half with about 1 million ingredients. I crept down to the top of the staircase and I could see you bouncing around doing moves with a spoon. It was so funny that I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing. Then I saw something that got me really scared. You laid 2 places at the table. I thought there was someone else in the house and I climbed all the way up to the ceiling thinking they'd see me. As I was hanging there, I saw you serving 2 plates and I couldn't move for the panic. Another person. I just knew I wouldn't like them as much as you. That they'd ruin everything and make me go all crazy like I used to be. I didn't know what I'd do. I was ready to hurt them. Really hurt. That's how scared I was. Then you sat down. You lit the candle on the table and started eating by yourself. Nobody else showed up. And after you were done, you took the other food and threw it away. Even though I was relieved, I kind of felt bad that the other person never showed up. You didn't seem sad, though. It was like you'd expected it to just be you. After you went to bed, I went through the bin and ate some of the food you threw away. It was delicious. I knew something was wrong the next day because you didn't leave for work, and then you ran a bath in the middle of the afternoon. After you'd been in there for ages and ages, I started to get this horrible bad feeling. I crawled down to the landing. The bathroom door was open a creak, so I peeked through. I saw your hand. It was hanging, not in a natural way. There was this long red line going down it, and then I realized I ran back upstairs. I'm a coward. I know I'm a coward. I hid under my pile of stuff and started to cry. I thought about the color a pink bath mat goes when it's covered in blood. I thought about how much I wanted to be somewhere else, but most of all, I thought about you and how little sense you make. What I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry I lit your roof on fire. It was the only way I could think to get people to come. It actually worked better than I expected. That recycling stuff sure did burn. I ran down to the cupboard under the stairs and curled up with my hands over my head until I heard them kick the door down and carry you out. There was a lot of commotion and bad language, but they found you, and I heard one say you were still breathing. So my favorite place in the whole world is gone now. Most of my things as well, though I did think to grab the pattern tube. The rest is just a big black wig on top of your house, but I'm not scared. You'll get better, and when you come back, I'll still be here. I don't think it's nice to be alone. I'm not the type of doctor that usually gets emergency calls from patients, so I was definitely confused when my latest contacted me in the middle of the night and begged to see me right away. He seemed sincere enough that I told him I'd meet him at my office. That groggy and half-awake choice is the only reason my family is still alive. While I was putting on my clothes and trudging out to the car, I tried to remember everything I could about Anton. When he'd first come to us, he'd been deaf for 8 years due to an auto accident, so he was perfect for the trials. Of the 20 patients who'd undergone ear and nerve regeneration therapy, he'd been the first to begin hearing again. He'd been so happy the last few weeks, I had no idea what could have gone wrong. I was so preoccupied that I didn't even notice the streetlights were out. When I arrived at my office, he was already standing at the far corner of the parking lot, nervously scanning the area. Cast in white by my headlights, he frantically waved his arms horizontally to get me to turn my car off, and then wordlessly insisted I hurry and unlock the front door of the building. I was concerned, but had never known him to be violent or on drugs, so I got out my keys, held myself a bit guarded away from him, and opened the door. He slipped past me on the left as I entered, nearly knocking me aside before he took up position behind the floor-to-ceiling glass wall and continued peering out into the night. His behavior more than warranted comment. "Anton, are you in danger? We should call the police," he began to exclaim. "No!" but cut himself off harshly after the initial "nuh" sound and went bug-eyed. After another hurried scan out the window, he turned to me and whispered, "No police. They can't help." Attempting to control his anxiety and help him focus, I held out an arm and led him into my office. Sitting down in a familiar setting by yellow lamplight appeared to help him, but he shook his head when I went to turn on the bright white overheads. Acquiescing, I sat behind my desk and let him explain himself. "Doctor," he said with emphasis, as my title was the whole reason he was coming to me, "I've been hearing things." Despite my best effort, I let slip a micro-expression of confusion. Anton widened his eyes and hurriedly elaborated. "I know that's the whole point of the treatment, and I've been very happy with my progress so far. You guys have been great, the whole team. It's just that there's something more going on. Last week, I began to hear this absurd, crazy choir of whistling like constant wind chimes during the day. That was not a good sign. A flaw in the nerve regeneration process could create problems for our funding and for other patients, Perhaps some form of tonight. No, he countered. They were real sounds. It was super annoying, and I spent all Saturday afternoon tracking it down until I finally found it. A bunch of people were blowing whistles at the dog park. I frowned. Some sort of protest? No, dog whistles. I could hear dog whistles. At that, I sat up a little taller in my seat. An unexpected discovery in the process could create quite the opposite of problems for our funding. You could hear dog whistles? You're certain? He nodded, clearly relieved that I was believing him so far. We can run tests to confirm, but that's fantastic. Not only has your normal hearing been restored, but your range of frequencies. Yes, he said in a sudden emphatic whisper. Hearing the dog bark is one thing, but it didn't stop there. All week it got worse. Damn. I got out a pad of paper and pen to take notes. Go on. Encouraged by that, he leaned forward in his chair and gripped the edge of my desk. I first began to hear them on Monday. The Monday a few nights ago. Yes, I didn't know what it was, but I chalked it up to my better hearing and tried to ignore it that first night. The longer I lay there in bed, the more the sounds began to come into focus. It was like this muffled wiggling sound coming from outside, but when I opened the window, I couldn't be sure if it was louder. I wrote it down, but remained uncertain. It continued to get worse after that? He ran a hand back along his unkempt hair and sighed with relief at finally having his anxieties heard. Yeah, never during the day, never when there's music playing or people around or the television left on. It's always at night when I'm alone. A feeling comes over me, like my body telling me I'm in danger for some reason, and then I begin to hear it. It's a rapid back and forth swishing sound, but dampened somehow. It's like it's coming from far away, or at least it's far away until I make a noise. Until you make a noise? You think these sounds are responding to you somehow? I know they are, he insisted quietly. They're swimming around out there looking for prey, like any living thing would be. See? That's what I figured out tonight, and that's why I called you. After spending every night all week listening to it, I finally got it. I'm hearing swimming sounds. They're all different, too. A pulsing octopus, some fish, maybe shark, or other ocean things that I can hear when I finally sleep. When I dream, things get all screwed up and horrifying with screams and calls that would make you shiver for the rest of your life. I looked up a bunch on Wikipedia, but the sight of them... He trailed off into visible rising anxiety. I stopped writing and held up a hand. Whoa, Aton. Let's just walk it back a step. If you think you're hearing swimming sea life, where's the ocean? He slowly raised his head to look me straight in the eyes. Behind his irises, a dark glare of sprouting madness burned. All around us, Doc. I began to reach for my phone, but he drew a long knife from under his shirt and held it forward. Breathing hard, he shouted, Don't do it! You hear me out! I'm not crazy! I tried to tell my friends, I tried to tell my folks, everyone thinks I'm crazy. Just listen to me! This was the first time a patient of mine had ever gotten violent, but I knew the procedures. Okay, Anton, I'll listen. You just bring the stress level in here down a little and lower the knife. I'm not gonna drop it, he told me, his gaze sharp. Just listen to me! Okay. He waited. I looked down at his knife and up at his face twice. Your pen and paper? He said. Right. I lifted them carefully, eyeing him for signs of quick movement. Here's my reasoning, Doctor. He finally continued, returning to calmer and more formal speech. I hear things swimming by all the time. I try to stay where it's loud. The noise wards them off, like animals avoiding a boat. I went to a concert. I left the TV on. You know that feeling that you get when you're all alone and you just want to run? Like something's chasing you out of the dark and you just need background noise to feel safer? I gulped down an unhappy knot. Yeah? It's them, he whispered. They're out there, but you see, I've got a problem now. That lamp on your desk? It's got batteries, right? The small yellow lamp had been a gift. Yes. The rest of the world doesn't have batteries. The power's out in Los Angeles, New York, and here. They're coming for us. The power was out? I hadn't even noticed because he'd shaken his head when I tried to turn on the overheads. There's no music, he said with rising fear. There's no television to leave on. They're swimming freely all over the city. They're closer than ever, and I have no way to avoid them. He turned his head as if listening to some nearby noise. None of us do. They'll hear us. Something occurred to me that I figured might just save my life. Wait, so you hear wiggling sounds when you're alone and it's quiet? Yeah? He seemed momentarily hopeful at my question. It's your ears. I laughed. It all made sense. If your hearing's gotten that good, then when there's no other sources of sound, you're hearing the microscopic life in your ear canal. He froze as his anxiety found an avenue for explosive decompression. Oh. He stared at me for a moment. Like super tiny things? Yeah, I said, smiling at him as he lowered the knife. Anton, you're gonna be fine. We'll figure out a way to dull your hearing a little so you don't have to hear them. Everyone's got tiny little bugs on them, visible only with microscopes. They can't hurt you. But his anxiety didn't fall away completely. I don't know. It sure sounds like I'm underwater and things are swimming all around me. He lifted the knife again. Where would there be an ocean? I asked him. We're in San Francisco. We're not deep underwater, in some ocean filled with nightmare things. Come on, shout. Go on. Take a yell. Kick the false terror to the curb. I want to. I just... Do it. Be the good man I know you are. Unsure of what to do, he half smiled, half frowned, then gave a weak yell of defiance. Good, I told him. Again, come on, yell. Damn things, he said louder. I needed him to see that we were safe. Yell, Anton. Damn things, you aren't real, he shouted at the top of his lungs. I'm not afraid of... The next part has taken me a couple days to piece together by memory. There was an explosion of some sort, but lacking fire. The floor and the ceiling seemed to implode into each other, sending wood, brick, and glass shrapnel in every direction. My desk took much of the blast, but obviously since I'm still in the hospital, I didn't escape unscathed. Anton disappeared in an instant among the debris, but as I stumbled out of the destroyed front half of the building, I saw no blood of any kind. He'd been entirely consumed. Staggering to my car in the parking lot, I turned and had one good solid look at the aftermath. I'd been wrong. He had not been hearing microscopic life in his ear canal. I knew I was wrong because before the rest of the building collapsed from the strain, I saw the shape of the attack that had done it. It was like looking at an apple after a bite. Absolutely and undeniably the result of massive unseen jaws big enough to take out half of a 2-story building in one crunch. He was right. They are out there, and we are pursued by unseen creatures in the night. When you're alone, when it's quiet, and when you get that feeling to run and hide and stay silent, listen to it. Just listen to it. I was 8 years old and in the hospital. My mother was caressing my shoulder, familiar worry etched into her face. The white room we were in smelled like flowers dipped in rubbing alcohol. Next to her was the doctor, hunched toward me and taking his sweet time suturing the final stitches in my fingertip, the one I foolishly sliced open with a can lid. It hurt. Even with the shots they gave me, it still hurt. But behind the mild tugs and the sharp jolts of pain, my mind took notice of something moving in the room. A small, grainy shape floating by the doctor's head. An orb, like a snow globe. Aimlessly, it wafted around the room, a helpless bubble caught in an unseen current. The inside of it fluttered with swarming specks of light that made me think of fireflies. All at once, the specks condensed in the orb's center, throbbing brightly with a pulse of light, and then continuing to swarm in their different directions. They did this at a steady pace, just like the pulse in my finger. "Mom?" I finally asked. "Do you see the fairy?" Both she and the doctor exchanged puzzled looks. That was the first time I saw them. The second time was at my friend's house back in 7th grade. It was a school night, and we'd spent the evening shifting between scary movies and reaction videos. What had started for me as a slight ache in my temple soon escalated into a pounding migraine. My head was absolutely killing me. I dreaded the walk back home, and my friend's dad let me sleep on his couch until the painkillers sedated me. In the quiet darkness of his stairway, I caught another orb in my peripheral vision. Its hazy, light-filled body drifted by the stairs. The same clustered specks, the same whisking, clueless movements. But one thing was different. This time, I could smell the strong, musty smell of an ashtray. When the painkillers kicked in, both the orb and the smell were gone. It wouldn't be until later that same month that I found out my friend had lost his mother to lung cancer caused by her favorite cigarettes. There is an eerie comfort in realizing you aren't crazy, that the things you'd noticed all your life weren't just figments being upchucked out of the imagination. Pain. That's the trigger point. It's the only way I can see the spirits, or entities, or whatever you'd like to call them. I've always considered that a blessing. Without my endorphins working as an off switch, I'd see them everywhere, coasting all over the place, bumping into each other like jellyfish corpses. I've tried touching them, even going as far as to try to catch one in a jar. No dice. They're all incorporeal. Not all of them have their own distinct smells. Don't ask me what factors into that either. Sometimes, if I'm close enough to one, I can make out something reflected off its transparent surface. A faint glimpse of lips, hair, maybe an eye staring back at me. I don't consider myself a medium or anything highbrowed like that, nor do I talk to anyone about these sorts of things. Attention isn't something I seek. To be honest, I'm just someone used to being out of the ordinary. I was born with cat eye syndrome in my left pupil, an abnormality that elongates its shape. Contrary to the name, my pupil looks more like a glob of ink sliding down my iris than the eye of my gray cat. Because it can't dilate on its own, I'm also extra sensitive to bright things. For the most part, I've gotten used to the double takes from people, the look one more time then snap away approach. School thickened that tolerance. Kids called me Cyclops and liked to spread rumors that I was infected with some horrific disease. I'm not sure if that's the reason I can see the things I do, but one thing is certain. My left eye can spot them a lot more clearly in the dark. One Thursday evening, in the faint point of summer, my uncle contacted my father and asked if I'd like to visit him for a few days. My uncle was looking for some last-minute assistance renovating a new home he was getting ready to move into and offered me a chance to make some extra money. Considering that he'd cover the flight to Mississippi, I took him up on it. Being a fresh graduate out of high school, I was scrounging up whatever funds I could find for college. The trip from Los Angeles to Delta, Mississippi was over 3 hours, and Uncle Davin was already there at the pickup spot. I wasn't just there for the job. Getting to see him was worth the flight all on its own. You'd never meet a brighter spirit than his, always smiling and lending a helping hand, despite his own personal troubles. When he wasn't preaching at his local church, he was giving back to the community, somewhere, some way. "Catch the Southern Spirit," a dented sign said, welcoming us to Holmes County. Whatever that was, I hoped it wasn't contagious. We reached where I'd be staying for the next few days, a farmhouse that could easily fit a family of 5. Uncle Davin's backyard opened up to a large field with tall trees lining the borders. In the distance was the decaying corpse of an abandoned barn. The closest neighbors were miles away, between vast cotton fields and cypress swamps. If anyone ever asked my uncle why he chose the backwoods of Mississippi, he'd merely shrug and say,
"We were sick of all the noise, I guess."
Ironic considering the obscene number of mockingbirds surrounding his property. You couldn't take 2 steps out of his front door before hearing them whistle at you from the tree line. Even at night, the lonely male sang. I'm sure my uncle did need help with the refurbishment, but more than likely, he just wanted some company. Aunt Rosie, his wife, had passed away due to heart conditions not long ago. They'd moved there together some time ago, to the land of flat glades and blues music, only for one to be left behind, all alone. I'd met Aunt Rosie a handful of times, and each visit she'd be nothing but kind and generous. It was unfortunate we'd been unable to make it to the funeral due to my father's poor planning with flight tickets and mixing up the dates. Despite that, Uncle Davin had no bad feelings towards his brother. By nightfall, I'd finished unpacking in the guest room and waited for the forlorn songs to put me to sleep. The next morning, we got up early, ate breakfast, and made our way to the job. We spent the whole afternoon clearing rooms, tearing out carpets, and sanding down hardwood floors. By the end of the day, we'd managed to finish a few rooms and get started on the bathroom tiles. I was exhausted. On the long stretch of road back to my uncle's house, he gave me a hefty pat on the shoulder.
Thanks for the help, pal. And just for coming by in general.
No problem. I yawned. He averted his gaze back to the road and started to whistle the tune, Home on the Range.
That was her favorite song, you know.
He said.
The same one she'd always sing after church. Of course, the little beak bastards learned it. So I can still hear it in the driveway.
A hard sigh blew out of his nose.
It's hard being honest with yourself, isn't it?
What do you mean?
I mean, having to accept that things change, no matter what you do or could have done. It's good to embrace life, to accept the fact that it's both cruel and beautiful.
I watched his neck slightly turn toward the pale orange tint of the sky.
You can thank God you still have eyes that can see the sunset, but it will never look as pretty as it used to.
He then switched on the radio, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. That night, instead of sleeping, I was doodling some sketches on the writing desk in my room. I'm no artist, but it was a nice distraction from Uncle Davin's long, slow snores floating down the hallway. Something then grazed my nose, a lingering fragrance of floral and citrus, perfume. I looked around the room and spotted movement at my door. A small, dancing orb. Its center seemed to wink when it got my attention. The lamp on my desk flickered slightly. But I wasn't in pain. In fact, I felt fine. An icy worry crept down my neck. Was I in pain somewhere and hadn't even noticed? The orb lazily approached me and then hastened back to the doorway. I'd never seen one move like that before. Curious, I moved toward it and watched it as it made its way toward the stairs and stopped, waiting. It wanted me to follow it. Another realization sparked inside of me. This was Aunt Rosie's perfume. I trailed down the steps after the orb and watched as it sank through the door to the backyard. Grabbing my jacket and my shoes, I stepped into the cold of outside. Sharp air brushed my cheeks. Cicadas made song sounds from the underbrush, underscoring the mockingbird's whistles. The orb was in the field, blinking like a distant lantern. When I finally reached it, the thing dropped and sank into a dead patch of grass. Then the bird started to scream. A whiteness swelled out of the ground. It lit the surrounding turf, still inflating like an oversized balloon about to burst. I raised a hand to shield my eyes from the intense glow. It was huge, a large round tumor of vibrating, pulsing light. And inside the white plastered center of its haze were black twisting shapes, vague shadowy objects forming like blots of ink on a canvas. What do you see? Rorschach asks. Hands, fingers, all forming out of the white milky haze, clawing at its insides. Tormented, wailing faces were pushing outward against the orb's stretching yet unyielding inner walls. Their silhouetted mouths stretched open in soundless agony. The brightness shot pain into my left pupil, but I didn't dare look away. I felt dizzy, like I needed to grab onto something, to clasp a little bit of reality back into my hands. But there was nothing. Just me, the field, and the orb full of terrible, writhing things. A playground of pure hysteria. Then, out of the squirming void formed a woman's face. Aunt Rosie's face. Her features as clear as day. Her eyes held the desperate look of someone helpless. Her skin was pasty and loose like melting wax. Her hair was tangled and clumped with dark clots of mud. I watched her colorless lips open and close, speaking, but no words reached me. My legs trembled and I staggered back. I felt like someone on stilts, about to snap their neck along the pavement. I was going to faint. Before the dizziness overtook, I craned my neck toward the house. The lamp in my room was flickering rapidly. Then, nothing. I'm not sure how long I was out, but when I came to, the orb and my aunt's face were gone. Needless to say, sleep was a non-existent thing that night. Every so often, I'd once more peer out the window, wondering if I'd see that glow in the field again. When morning finally came, it didn't take long for my uncle to notice how exhausted I was.
You all right, pal?
He asked as I dozed off in the passenger seat. Yeah, I didn't get much sleep. I'm all right. I wasn't, not by a long shot. A part of me wanted to tell him the truth, that hours ago, his deceased wife had somehow made contact with me, that she looked distressed, like she needed help. But what would that do for him? He'd been through enough as it was. No, I needed to ruminate on it some more. Another hard day's work, and we completed a good portion of the house. To celebrate, we went out to eat and watched some late-night stand-up. 2.5 hours after that, I was sitting at the desk, still eyeing the field. I wasn't sure what to expect, or even how to digest the information I had already. Then, sure as hell, just as I started to feel that pinprick of ease, the small orb floated by. Its delicate light blinking at me, perfume wafted in my face. Still, there was no pain. I swallowed hard. Aunt Rosie, is that you? No response, just more drifting. I tried again. If that's you, make a sound. Move to the hallway. Give me a sign or something. As I said that, the lamp on my writing desk flickered. Can you do that again? I asked. The light spasmed once more. I need to know if you need help. As though harnessed to my voice, the lamp started to flash its light again. It stopped, then started again, repeating the same exact pattern twice more. Pulses that were short, long, and distinct. Without thinking, I grabbed a sheet of paper and started to write. It was a jumbled, seemingly random flicker to most, but to me, it was a signal. I should thank my time as a Boy Scout for that. We used to spell out swear words to the neighboring troops with our flashlights. I scribed the sequence the orb was repeating. Help. That was it. We were communicating. You need to tell me more, I said. Why do you need help? The lamp flashed again steadily, adding to the pattern. Help us. I twisted my head toward the orb, which was now circling the room like an intoxicated sprite. She was calling to me, pleading for help, but it was not just Aunt Rosie. There were more of them. There was us. Before I even asked another question, the message shifted. Killed. I felt a sharp pang of anxiousness. Why that word? Why that awful, awful word? A cold, jagged word that punched into me like cold metal. My heart lurched painfully as if pumping excess fluid from my chest, trying to save itself from drowning. I didn't want to ask the next question. I didn't want the answer. Who killed you? Husband. No. I crossed the word out, as though that held even an ounce of power. That wasn't possible. My uncle was a saint, the most selfless man I knew. He cared for people. He gave sermons at church. He'd never hurt anyone, let alone the love of his life. My brain rejected the notion. It was wrong. It had to be. The light blinked out another sequence, pausing because the bulb was starting to go out. Just as its last speck of life shorted out, I got the final message. Basement. When I checked back on the orb, it was also gone. fizzled. Gathering my thoughts, I quietly made my way to the basement door. The stairs shuddered under me. It had to have been 4, maybe 5 in the morning. I didn't know and didn't care. Sleep was the last thing on my overloaded brain. The basement was cold and spacious, with concrete walls, gray cabinets, and a workbench against the wall. Beyond that was just a small square window to the backyard. I paced the room, unsure of what I was even looking for. On the right side of the room was a door propped inches open. I pulled it open the rest of the way to reveal a small closet with a chair in the center. The chair had thick leather straps made for wrists and ankles. The legs were firmly nailed into the ground. It looked like something made for a hysterical patient in a psych ward. The wooden arms were perforated with deep grooves where fingernails had scratched into them. Surrounding the chair in the closet was a rough circle of salt, lined with rows of now melted candles. I had to step back and remind myself to breathe. The thought of being strapped down in that small vertical space gave me a choking, suffocating feeling. I went back to my bedroom, where sleep would never find its way back to me. Before I knew it, my uncle and I were making the final trip to get the remaining rooms refurbished. Throughout the day, there was an evident awkwardness between us. The chair was a constant overtone in my thoughts. I was thinking of 1,000 ways to bring it up to him. It felt like a dangerous question, like one I should save for after I was gone, one for over the phone, but even then, what would that do? During the drive back to his house, I couldn't hold it all in anymore. I had to say something. Uncle Davin? He tilted his neck toward me. I'm sorry to ask this, but it's been eating at me for a while now. How did Aunt Rosie die exactly? Something stirred in his eyes, a subtle fleck of surprise that quickly slunk back to the corner it was hiding in.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting a question like that. She had heart problems. Didn't I tell you and your folks already?
No, not me. I lied. You probably mentioned it to my parents, though.
Yeah. You're probably right. What has you so curious?
He gave me a quizzical look. Just the chair in your basement, my thoughts pestered. Yes, just the chair with the leather straps and nailed legs. Who was that for? No reason. I shrugged. Just a bad dream I had last night. The conversation dwindled after that and didn't spark again for the rest of the evening. I was sitting at the writing desk, chewing my nails down to ragged stubs. The bulb I had replaced had not yet blinked or fluttered. My flight was tomorrow, and I couldn't tell if I was dreading it or yearning for it. I rang my dad's phone, to no avail, and my mom's was going straight to her voicemail. I just wanted to talk, to hear another voice in my head other than my own. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," I said. My uncle lightly pushed the door open, a glass of dark whiskey in his hand.
Hey, pal.
He sighed.
It's your last night up here. Did you want to watch a movie with me?
No thanks, I'm pretty tired actually. His face gave a faint, troubled look.
What's going on between us? I feel like you're upset.
No, I'm not. Sorry. I just have a lot on my mind right now.
You were in the basement, weren't you?
A lump of panic formed in my throat. What? He sighed heavily and stepped toward the bed, practically stumbling into it for a hunched seat. I realized then how drunk he already was.
That's why you ask, huh?
He muttered.
Because you were, worried?
I wasn't sure what to say. This wasn't Uncle Davin sitting across from me, but a cheap, carbon copy of him that drank itself silly and hid secrets from people.
I'll share something with you,
he said dryly.
Something I haven't shared with the rest of the family. To be, honest, I've been rather self-conscious about it.
His eyes wilted toward the whiskey between his hands.
I used to be an exorcist. You know what that is, right?
I nodded my head.
Good boy. I figured you would.
He chuckled nervously.
I understand if subjects like that are fairy dust to you, but if you'd seen what I have, maybe you'd get it. People harming themselves, screaming at me with voices that didn't belong to them. eyes rolling back in their sockets, foam spewing out of their mouths. People came to me for help. Yeah, they came to me, and I helped them.
He repeated sullenly.
I helped all of them.
What does that have to do with Aunt Rosie? He twirled the glass in his hand, spilling some liquor on the floor.
This house never liked me, hated me from the start. Something was wrong with it. Something was here first, in the basement. Rosie found it, and it got to her, made her act strange.
He choked out the end of the sentence, pausing to wipe a tear from his cheek.
She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to hurt herself. I had to do it. I had to get it out of her. And I did. But her heart,
His body lurched into his lap.
it was already so weak. She couldn't make it. I can't go back down there. I can't. That's why you've been helping me renovate the new house, because I can't be here anymore. It's too much for me.
The rest of the words drained into incoherent sobs.
I'm sorry, pal. I'm sorry.
I helped him off the bed and led him down the hall to his room. His breath reeked of disgusting alcohol.
Tried. Couldn't get rid of it.
He mumbled as I got him to bed.
Had to bury it.
The door clicked shut behind me. I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much to break down. My legs brought me to the garage. Enough was enough. My uncertainty, every last bit of it, had graduated into a searing clarity. Find the truth. I trudged through the backyard, shovel in hand. The cold air couldn't reach me. The mockingbirds were whistling and singing from the tree line. I marched onto the dead patch of grass in the field and started digging. The birds shrilled in a choir of high-pitched whistles. "Shut up!" I barked at them, pushing the round-pointed blade deeper into the earth. Then, I heard the subtle scrape of it hitting something. I dropped to my knees and raked the wet dirt aside. It looked like a wine box, absolutely caked in a red, waxy substance. Things clattered around inside of it. This was it, the truth. I cracked open the seal and peered within. There were old pennies, a lock of black, brown hair bound with a cord, and a single candle holder. Then, light. A wave of light erupted out of the box. It washed over my wrists, slipping inside my sleeves like burning ice. It crawled up my arms, gushing out of the box like blood from an artery. The light swelled and expanded, converging over me in the roundish shape of a large sphere. My body went numb. The world melted into vague, swirling images. I could still hear the cry of the mockingbirds converge into a piercing, rhythmless pitch, louder and louder. It slid into my ears, blotting out all senses and understanding, drowning me inside out. I couldn't breathe anymore. I couldn't taste the cold air. My feet no longer felt the ground under me. I was falling down a deep, airless shaft. No more light, just an endless, hungry darkness. The muscles in my arm tensed painfully. A voice that wasn't mine started to scream. When I came back, I was standing in a dark room. The screaming had stopped. My heart was pounding my ribs like a caged animal. I was sticky with sweat. Whatever I was holding suddenly clattered onto the floor. A kitchen knife, wet with blood. Dread swallowed my thoughts. My eyes traced the room, my uncle's room, and settled on the bed, where a bundle sat stationary beneath the covers. A body. The sheets were doused in red and torn greatly with newly opened slits. My trembling hands were coated in it. Help! My ruptured mind managed to pull together. We need to get help! I twisted toward the door and stopped. A slew of blood smeared over the wall in crude, wet letters read, "Thank you." I called the police, but my uncle was long dead before they arrived. I was taken in and arrested, since I was the only one in the house, the only one with the murder weapon. My prints were all over the crime scene. I'll be going to court for manslaughter charges pretty soon. According to my appointed lawyer, our best bet in the system is an insanity plea.
Whatever had been inside that box had taken my body for a ride and stabbed Uncle Davin 20 times. I'll never forgive myself for letting that happen. Thank you, it had told me after I let it out. I'm sorry, Uncle Davin. I'm so sorry for what I've done to you and for whatever hell I've released into the world. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. Most days, the walls are empty, bare. That shade of black I hated so much that I told her it looked like our bedroom was a witch's coven, which in turn only made her love it more. She said she'd always wanted to be a witch ever since she was a little girl, and then she pressed herself against me and asked if I had any problems with witches, especially ones who could do this. And then it didn't take me long to shut up and forget all about it. But some days, if I'm lying very still and holding the stone in my hands, the walls open. I don't know how to explain it. It's as if the paint gets darker and darker and somehow thicker, more tangible, as if it expands in all directions, getting deeper and wider, and slowly it yawns out in front of me, going back and back until I see them. I think they're poplar trees, thin, with white trunks reaching up into this new darkness with empty branches. Once I see the poplars, I know it's time to get up. That's when the wall is, well, I suppose, no longer a wall, but something else. And when I step off my bed, the floor is not wood, but earth. Cold, wet earth. The first few times it happened, I didn't go very far. I'd maybe walk a few minutes before turning around. I'd explore, in one direction or the other, this strange and secret wood that appeared in the walls of my home. It seemed, for the most part, to stay the same. It felt vacant somehow, as if something was missing here that was present in the real world. But as I spent more time there, that feeling grew less and less. I didn't think I had much in the real world, at least not anymore. Not after Mary had got sick and grown gaunt, and her skin shrunk around her bones and the hollows of her cheeks. Her wrists turned to pale twigs, her breathing grew raspy, pained, not after we were told that she didn't have much longer, that despite their best efforts, there was nothing they could do, and that we maybe had a month at tops. A month to squeeze in what was meant to be a lifetime. I could only tell her I loved her so many times, only spend so long holding her as she lost weight, try to pretend I didn't know she cried in secret, and tried not to admit how scared she was. Once she confessed to me, after a sleepless night, that she'd been vomiting into a plastic bowl, in a voice small and scared, that she didn't want to die. That she was so scared sometimes she couldn't breathe, and she thought she'd do anything to make it stop. The worst part was I could do nothing. I didn't know what to say that would help. The truth was unavoidable, real. I did not know her family well, and at the funeral they seemed to avoid my eye contact. She'd always said they were strange, had never wanted me to meet them, had said that there were things buried there that she didn't want to uncover. They wore funny clothes, smelt of strange herbs and incense, and spoke in whispers at the service. It hurt even more. The thought that there was this whole part of her life I knew nothing about, would know nothing about. And it hit me then how much we'd still had to do, how much more of her there was to love that I'd never found time to, and I'd had to close my eyes until that feeling went away. The funeral had been in the morning, and I'd sat by her grave until it grew dark. I'd read parts of her favorite books out loud, Parts of Frankenstein, Wuthering Heights, Rosemary's Baby that she'd underlined several times, pages that she'd folded the corners of and left in her scrawled handwriting, tiny exclamation marks and love hearts, pages she'd marked with little drawings, cobwebs, cats, moths, all packed into the margins. I loved her for that, always filling the spaces that should have been empty. Her grandmother had stayed a while, her eyes entirely white, blind, I assumed, and without saying a word. I don't know if she knew I was there or if she thought she was alone, but we stood for an hour at least together. There was something about her I couldn't place. She moved as if she didn't quite belong to this world, as if reality for her was a fluid and malleable thing. Then she'd bowed her head, said something in a language I didn't understand, and left, by the tombstone, a small black pebble. We hadn't moved in yet. Most of our stuff was still scattered across the country, some at my parents', some in our old flats, some at various friends'. Our house was bare, except for the bed and basic appliances. I had, at the time she died, nothing of hers but the books in my bag, the clothes in her closet, and a hole in my stomach that I thought would never go away. And so I took the stone. I know I shouldn't have, but it felt like an artifact of her life somehow. It felt as if by taking it, I could hold on to her for a little longer, could have something that was hers, was meant to be hers, and that maybe she wouldn't slip away so fast. I almost felt as if she might come back for it. I had this image in my head that she'd walk up the stairs one morning, flushed from a run or with breakfast, and she'd say that that was her stone, her pebble, and she'd stay a while, perhaps the whole day. That it would give her an excuse to come back from wherever she was and just be with me until she had to go back. I spent more and more time in the forest. Sometimes I'd go for hours, just wandering around the trees, listening to the faint sound of a brook somewhere, closing my eyes and focusing on feeling nothing. I discovered a small hill. If you climbed for long enough, there was a spot where the trees thinned, and you could see the forest around you. Endless white needles from the black soil, stretching on in every direction. I saw the brook I had only heard up until that point, followed the trail it cut. That was where I saw her, washing her hands in the brook, humming something slow and sad to herself. At first, I thought I might have gone mad, thought that this was where the delusion finally caught up to me, finally dragged me under. But no, I was sure that was her. I was sure my mind couldn't recreate all of her. The way she bit her lip as she thought, the way she hummed with her mouth slightly open so it sounded a little like singing. The small perfections I recognized but could not name. I had no other choice. I ran towards her, shouted her name over and over, "Mary, Mary, Mary," and she looked up and suddenly seemed so terrified, and she shouted that I couldn't be here, that I mustn't be here, that this place wasn't meant for me. I tried to shout back, but the noise had caught in my throat, and the air ate my words, and I was mute, and I felt my legs grow denser and heavier, and the closer I got, the more I could see how scared she looked. I was convinced that she needed saving, and as I grew close, I felt the world around me shimmer. I stumbled and found myself in bed. I'd been so close. From then on, it was an obsession, finding her. I'd spend days in the woods, looking for any signs, climbing hills, mapping the whole forest in my mind, following the path of the brook until it led to a stream, following the stream until it led to a lake. Still nothing. Just a vast black landscape dotted with white trees. If I turned before entering the forest, I'd be able to see my body, still lying in bed, facing the ceiling, and it was the same when I returned. Sometimes I'd come back to find my parents or friends huddled around me in fetal positions, eyes wide open, and they'd be talking to me softly, telling me it was okay, that I was okay, and I'd have a moment before I climbed back into my skin and bones that suddenly felt so heavy, to watch as they smoothed my hair and held my hand, and I did nothing but stare into space. As I went deeper into the forest, it began to change. The trees got thicker and the spaces between them shrank. I also began to get the feeling that I wasn't alone. Not just that Mary was here somewhere, but that something else was. I could sometimes smell it. The goat musk, sharp and acrid amongst the cool dirt. It was something heavy that bruised the bark of the trees as it passed. It could smell me. The heat and scent I left, I knew that much, and I'd often retrace my steps, heart pounding as I made my way back to the bed to find that it had torn the trees behind me, uprooted them and stripped them of bark. I imagined what it would do if it found me, what it would do if it found something that wasn't made from cold wood, that was flesh and bone and warm. The longer I spent there, the more present it grew. I'd see huge antlers through the gaps in the trees, a humanoid figure making its way to the base of the hill I was climbing, hear low moans from somewhere behind me. I figured it didn't want me there, that it was out to find me, or worse, Mary, before I could find her. If I hadn't wanted so desperately to see her, I might not have returned, but it became a compulsion. If the walls wouldn't change, I'd just wait. I'd move my thumb over the surface of the stone in long, slow circles, keeping completely still, as if moving would somehow break the spell the stone was casting. The beast got smarter, faster. I'd know it was waiting for me when I came, and sometimes I'd have to double back on myself, waiting for the sound of it crashing through the trees to fade, or for its low and mournful groans to fade entirely. Sometimes it felt like there was more than one, and I'd hear the groans echo, bursting from the trees in the distance at various points, a whole pack making that strange sound, searching, perhaps, for each other. At my worst moments, I thought maybe they were communicating about me, that they were somehow all grouping together to find my position, that one would come crashing through the trees, all rotting skin and teeth, and it would pin me down and try to burst me open like a fruit. And when these thoughts came, I'd have to steady myself against the trees and breathe. But I kept going. I next found her by the shores of the lake. She was washing her hair slowly, pulling it tight and then wringing it with her hands. I watched her for a while before saying something, watching the way she pursed her lips slightly as she concentrated, the way her back arched when she leant back. I moved out from behind the tree and asked her what I'd been thinking this whole time, asked her what she was doing here. She said she was waiting, that she was waiting here for me, but that I shouldn't be here, not yet, that I have so much more to do. She kept going, telling me that I was wasting it all by being here, that this was a sad and lonely place and I should not have come. She said if I stayed here too long, I'd forget why I came. My memories would leak from my mind like gas. I'd forget there was anything outside the forest, that I'd forget that the world wasn't just endless black soil and black water, and that she'd hear me, not saying her name but moaning in the night, and as if on cue, there was the noise of a beast in the distance, and I realized what a lonely sound it was, how confused and sad and searching it was. She said she'd wait here for me as long as it took, but that I shouldn't return until I had to, until I had no other choice. She said that she loved me, said that she knew I loved her, but that there were others who needed love too. And as she spoke, the forest grew thin around me, as if it had the texture of smoke, and behind it I could see my parents and my friends sat around my bed, talking in whispers, holding my hands, stroking my hair, watching over my body as it stared wide-eyed at the ceiling and did not move. I told her I was scared, that I didn't want to go, but if I became a beast, at least I'd be with her, and she shook her head. I tried to say something, one last thing, but couldn't think of anything fitting, of anything that could sum up everything I wanted so much to say. As I opened my mouth, I wasn't in the forest, but in my bed. And then I sat up, sobbing, heaving, so much I couldn't speak or breathe, and I could feel arms around me and I could hear their words, and although I couldn't turn off whatever had just sprung open inside me, I knew at least that I was loved. I stayed like that for a few hours, sobbing so much I couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything but her, until slowly I settled, centered. I took the stone back the next day, placing it where it had been left all that time ago. I could have sworn, though, that when I went to leave, in the spaces between the trees on the edge of the graveyard, I'd seen, just for a second, the figure of her grandmother, those white eyes fixed on me as if watching. I've renovated the house since then, painted over the black walls of the bedroom. I take it day by day. Sometimes I find myself wishing I had the stone, and I'll catch myself lying in bed for hours, seeing if I can will myself back into that place. But for the most part, I've put it behind me. I'll see her again when the time comes, and until then I have to keep myself busy. I imagine the low, sad moan I heard so often in that place, and I know that I have to find my reasons not to join them. That each day I have to find reasons not to join the beasts between the trees. The small room that was going to be the nursery I've now filled with her books. I painted it black, which I feel she would have wanted. From time to time, I'll come into it, pick a book at random and flick through, less to read the book itself and more just to see her handwriting, her tiny drawings and thoughts packed into the margins. Sometimes, if I've had a rough day, or have only barely made it out of bed, I'll find something new in the margins. The ink still fresh, a little note or heart or thought, and I'll know she's not gone, really. And if I close my eyes and concentrate, I'll be able to hear it faintly, the melody she sung by the lake with her mouth half open, and I'll know that she's singing for me.
It wakes you. Not the moan of a withered hag or the fleeting voice of a dead man, but the low trill of wind slipping past your window, air being pressed into a hushed breath. The shadows meld themselves back into your bedroom. You blink. The blurred, hazy object of your alarm clock focuses back to existence. 2:48 a.m., the numbers decree. You don't want to be awake. You don't even want to keep your eyes open, yet here you are. Outside, the air stirs in utter turmoil, churning up to 50 miles an hour and beating against your home. You'd known this was coming. In fact, you'd known it the moment you'd seen those thunderheads pulling in from the west, lightning forking within them. From the storm's downdraft came bursts of pine-laced wind, sharp and deceptively sweet. A destructive force careening from the Atlantic all the way through the Barrens, that large tract of wild, unbroken wilderness. You've often seen in the distance the tall, stocky pines of its dark woods shivering in the gales. What was it you were dreaming about anyway? Who knows? The information is already lost to the senseless grumble of thoughts trying to piece the dream back together. Gone. Although an image of falling water still rests vividly in your mind. Your bladder sends a signal to your brain, demanding relief. Half awake, you mechanically saunter down the short hall. You flick the lights on. Too bright. You rub away the floaters and zigzags from your eyes. You yawn as your soles scrape over the cold tiles, and then yawn again as you complete your natural business. Sweet release. You flush and lift the faucet handle to wash your hands. A sound. Your gaze flicks towards the door. You listen again. Silence, save for the occasional squeak and groan of the walls.
probably from the breeze battering them outside. Whatever it was, you're too tired to care. Glass shatters. Wakefulness spikes through you now as this new sound resonates, crawling up from the dark downstairs. You pull a sharp inhale down your throat. Your wet hands flinch soapy pellets over the countertop. Stop. Breathe. Calm yourself. It could have been anything, like a tree branch or some other debris that got swept up and propelled through the window. That's it, you tell yourself, nodding, hoping. A loud, powerful thud bangs downstairs and hope flees. Now, muffled movement. A break-in, a burglar. Horror films you haven't seen in years slide through your mind like celluloid movie reels. Your reflection in the mirror turns goosey white, contorted with fear. The police, your thoughts propose. Call the police. Your eyes trace the room for your phone. It's still lying on your bed. There's still time. You can rush back there, barricade the door, and call the police from the closet. How long will it take them to get here? Doesn't matter, just call them. You grip the doorknob, ready to sprint straight to your room. On the stairs freezes your limbs. Something fast and large bounds down your hallway just beyond the door. Something so terrible, so lively that even the deepest folds of your nightmares could never recreate this moment. Vibrations roll by your toes. Feet like heavy pegs tromp up to your bedroom door. It swings open, bashing clumsily against the wall at the forced entry. You stand there, anchored to the cold tiles of the bathroom, paralyzed by the shock of it all. The short space to your room fills with thrashing sounds, bedsheets being ripped and torn asunder, the box spring squeaking and jittering violently. Your fingers, still welded to the doorknob, refuse to twist it an inch further. A few steps away, something of significant size and savagery guts your mattress, the place you'd been just moments ago. A cold wash starts at your chest and drips to your groin. Your breathing is now terse as your heart pumps with a new and sudden weight. Your mouth is dry, your throat rubber. Focus. These are the impulses you must hold on to. The hot blood mounting up in your throat. The intensity dilating your pupils and lacing your eyes red. The lift in your gut from an absolute freefall. These things hardwired into your system will keep you alive tonight. The thrashing stops. A rapid cackling emerges. High, scratchy sounds grow louder as they echo down the hallway, expelling from a mouth you dare not imagine. The cackles sputter into bleeding, like a goat coughing up mucus. Not the sound of a burglar. Not at all. The thing moves again. Its hammer feet pound in chaotic pacing until it finally stops and settles on something. A succession of bangs on the closed door. Why? Because it thinks that's where you are. But what is it exactly? You can't stay here. You need to leave before it finds you. The cords in your hand tighten over the handle. You mentally prepare to enter the hallway. In your periphery, your bleached reflection in the mirror verifies your struggle with that simple action. But still, the hope of escape eases the gritty feelings of leaving this small space. You turn the knob fully now. The door opens, thankfully without a creak. You move quietly down the hall, light on the balls of your feet. The walls groan again as another draft clamors over them. The windows flash. The lightning is so close you can hear the crackling particles. You peer back towards your bedroom to make sure its attention hasn't left the closet. Another pound against it signals back, much louder out here. You continue, each measured step as slow as possible. Just one sound, one small little thump in the carpet. That's all it will take to alert something truly horrible. As you draw closer to the stairs, a sullen urgency pushes you to move just a little faster. You have the screaming urge to run, to barrel down the stairs and leap out of the front door in nothing but your underwear, but you resist. Judging by how quickly it had closed the gap from the stairs to your bed, you have no difficulty guessing who would win in a mad scramble. Not without a head start at least. A terrible crash reverberates behind you. The closet has been freed from its hinges. Heavy feet start moving again. It's coming. You kick off from your heels and practically vault the rest of the way. You round the stairs and take the first few steps. The grandfather clock that you had kept in the entryway has toppled on its face and now blocks the front doorway. No, not toppled, pushed. Chunks of glass riddle the floor from the broken window in the living room. You could push the clock out of the way, open the door just enough to slide through and get out, but there's no time. Deranged chatters move down the hallway behind you. It's closing in fast. Your bare soles clap down the stairs. You reach the bottom and wind around to the living room. Pain jolts up your leg. A sharp bit of glass has pricked into your toe. The shard crunches and embeds itself deeper into the nerve. Desperate, you fall towards the coffee table and roll beneath it. Heavy stomps now bang all the way down to the bottom step. You put a hand over your mouth. You squeeze your eyes shut. Another sickish bleat croaks out of the thing. It wanders the room. Wind whips through the broken window, kicking up the drapes. The steps are loud, like the hard heel of a dress shoe as it clacks against the hardwood. Different scents now trace your nose. A scent you can almost recognize. Something sharp and green, like being outside. It's that Yuleish scent of pine needles again, now blended with a thick, manure-y musk. The smell of the dark woods. Each hard step sends tremors through you. Don't look. Don't even take a breath. Don't think of what it'll do if it finds you. How vivid those thoughts teeming with horrors are. How quickly your screams will be silenced by teeth. How great the amount of blood that will pool out of your newly opened flesh, ripped and tattered like your bedsheets. Do not look. But, of course, you look. Your eyes negotiate with the surrounding darkness. You immediately regret looking. The deep sting in your foot no longer reaches you. The shock numbs the bulking fear welling up in your chest. Long, black legs canter near you. Tiered with fur, they're like the legs of a winter-skinny deer capped with bony, cloven hooves. Behind them, snakes a forked, leathery tail. A mouth you cannot see clicks its cuspids. The thing whoops loudly and then cackles like a hyena. No, your thoughts murmur, like the devil. The bony feet circle around and vanish into the black gap of the kitchen. A chair scoots as though brushed involuntarily. A clatter of things clang into the floor, pots and pans falling from their racks. You cautiously adjust your placement beneath the table. The pain in your soul sharpens again. Are you bleeding? Will it be able to smell the blood, to taste it lingering in the air? No. If that were the case, it would have found you by now. A vision you don't feed for very long. Perhaps you can wait it out, stay hidden until it gives up and moves on. A vain hope. It heard you run down the stairs. It knows you're still in here somewhere. You allow yourself to swallow, feeling unhinged by it all. This isn't your house anymore. It is somewhere else, some dark side of some distant planet you don't belong on, a place where something with hooves is stalking the halls, looking for you. The back door, maybe? No. You recall how the rollers were starting to stick and squeak lately, far too loud. And even if you did manage to squeeze through in time, the thought of having to outrun the thing fills you with immense dread. You look to the broken window. The frame is spiked with shards waiting to slice through an artery, not to mention all the scattered fragments your feet would surely find again. Running would be impossible then. An idea suddenly clicks. The car keys. You'd left them on the kitchen counter. They should still be there, mockingly close. If you can just reach them and sneak into the garage, you can get out of here. That, you reflect, sounds like a good plan. The thing migrates from the kitchen and moves down the hall. Its cloven feet thump down more stairs. The basement. It must think you've gone there. That will buy you some time. Not very much, though. Out you go from the coffee table. You breathe softly, small jitters rattling your lungs. You pause a moment to brush a few fingers across your foot to get the glass out. It works some, but you'll need tweezers to get the rest of those evil bits. In the kitchen, you glance about for your keys. Some pans and a dirty skillet litter the floor. The spice rack has toppled, and a feathery art piece of garlic powder has formed on the porcelain. You move forward toward the counter with cautious steps. From the lower level, a muted crash rises up. Something else has been shoved forcefully over. Hurry! You spot the keys. You stretch out your blood-speckled fingers and curl around them, carefully lifting them as to not let them jingle in your grip. another thought dawns on you and leads your hand next to the cutlery drawer. Sharp metal things rattle inside as you open it, much too loud for comfort, but you find and grab the sharpest knife there, so the noise is well worth it. A calculated risk. Having both the keys and the knife in your hands offers a small dose of victory, but you still need to make it down the hall, past the basement stairwell and into the garage. You peer down the corridor and hug the wall as you walk it. You pass by the basement quickly, imagining, just for a moment, something ready to screech its way out of the pitch. But in just a few paces, you've reached the doorway to the garage. You grab the doorknob and pull the door open. A new sound reaches you from behind, a wet, acknowledging grunt. You turn. From out of the unseen stairwell, a long, muscular neck twists towards you. Its hooves scrape into the hall. The house flashes with another strobe of lightning. Its jagged horns extend outward, coiled back in a goatish curl. Leathery skin hangs down from its thick-haired body, hitting its backside in wrinkled folds. Eyes the color of muddy water. Eyes that have finally found you. And reaching out of the mottled fur, a skinless, horsey face composed of yellowed, still living bone. It clicks its teeth together, sharp, waiting. Your hand does not move from the door handle. It clenches almost as tightly as the other hand does around the knife, both trembling. The blade is no more than a paperclip compared to the thing before you, twitching its talons. One of your feet is already out of the door, squeezed into the small crack of the garage, but there was never going to be a clean escape. It would never allow such a thing. The fear now settles in your legs, grasping the inside of them. It seeps into your joints, turning them into mulch. Thoughts cease altogether. In the next instant, you force yourself to move as everything else moves in rapid order. The door pulling open, hooves beating closer, a high, shrillish cackle. You squeeze into the garage, chased by hot, bestial breath brushing up your neck and down your shoulder. You move to sweep the door closed, but 3 hellish claws slip through the gap. They hook into the thin wood, propping the entry open against their leathery skin. It moves on the other end, tugging angrily at the panel. You pull against it with every cord, every tendon burning in your forearm. You jam the keyring into your mouth while the other hand struggles to keep hold of the knife. The thing yips loudly on the other end. Its thick stench clings to your face. It is strong, and as the pressure from its grasp continues to climb, you know that it is winning. In one quick motion, you plunge the knife deep into the webbing of its talons. A horrible sound, much like the yowl of a gray, dying cat, brays from the other side of the door. Dark, crimson blood runs down the steel that drips off in red tears. The claws retract, taking the handle with them as the door finally closes. You climb into your car, unwilling to take another breath until the keys finally find the slot. The engine roars to life, and all the symbols on the dash light up in green and amber. You yank the gear stick into reverse and nearly back the trunk straight into the garage door, thankfully catching yourself and clicking the opener just above your head. The door pulls open with a squeal of the rollers and hinges. Even before the metal sheet comes to a stop overhead, you back out and slope down the street. Hands still shaking, you simultaneously switch the gear to drive and slam a hurt foot over the gas pedal. The car peels down the road, revving higher and higher until your house and street are out of sight completely. You look to the rear view, partially anticipating to see it back there, standing tall and upright beneath a street lamp, but there's nothing. You've done it. You've escaped. Your wide, veiny eyes find the road again, as a spasm of wind nearly knocks you off course. It doesn't matter where you're going, not right now anyway. All that matters is getting as far away as possible. A thin laugh shivers out of you, perhaps jovial, perhaps a little bit manic. You slow down a little, finally allowing some calmness to penetrate through the panic. The wind still howls and sweeps over your vehicle, but as it quiets, a different sound rises behind it, like 2 heavy tarps flapping about. You look at the side mirrors and again at the rear view. Did you just see something? A thud sounds on the roof. You take another breath and depress the accelerator. about 30 minutes to midnight when my phone vibrates and starts to blare its ringtone. I jump off the couch and nearly have a heart attack. It's just another night, one that's been wonderfully quiet so far. After a chaotic Friday evening that lasted until 5 in the morning, it's nice to spend this Saturday alone at home, watching whatever crappy movies are on TV. I recover and answer it. It's Mike, though I can barely hear him over the pounding music in the background.
"We're leaving the club now,"
he screams.
"The girls ditched us, and Trent wants to go home early so he can go to church with his family."
Sounds good, I say. Did you bring enough cash for the cab this time? Mike's stories of getting stranded downtown in the middle of the night have become legendary.
"Nah, Jason has a car. He's driving us back."
I frown. Has he been drinking?
"Like 1 or 2 beers. He says he's fine."
He says something to someone nearby, but I can't make it out.
"I'll be home soon. Don't worry about staying up for me."
Thanks, but I'm not that tired. That and Mom and Dad told us to always deadbolt the door, and if I do that, you won't be able to get in. He laughs.
"Hey, I'm not sleeping in the front yard again, okay? I'll be home soon."
He hangs up and I go back to my movie. There's something about the mindless violence and explosions that just seems so relaxing. Or maybe it's the fact that school's finally done for the winter holidays, and my parents wisely decided to go on a cruise with friends for a week before Christmas. Mike and I have the house to ourselves. For him, it means no stern looks when he staggers home reeking of alcohol. For me, it's no constant reminders to start looking for a job in time for graduation. The movie goes to its 15th commercial, and I head to the kitchen for a snack. As I throw a bunch of eggs, cheese, and vegetables into a skillet, I hear a loud cracking noise in the backyard. I press my face to the cold, frosty window and look out, but there's nothing out there but a few bare trees and some freshly fallen snow. Probably just an animal. It can't be easy to survive the winter. My cell phone rings again, so I wander back into the living room and grab it. It's Mike. I can hear sirens in the background.
So Jason's friend kinda, lost control of the car.
It sounds like he's holding the phone half a foot away from his mouth. Oh God, what happened?
We hit a pole. The car's totaled, but we're all okay, I think. The cops are here. They're talking to the driver. He's definitely drunk.
No kidding.
They're ignoring the rest of us. There's a bus here, so I'm gonna go on and get home.
It sounds like a plan. I pause and grimace. Wait, do you know what bus to get on?
I'll figure it out. I'll call you when I'm close.
He's gone, and I'm back to the movie. There's a lull in the action when attractive male protagonists and attractive female protagonists engage in an awkward sexual conversation, which might have worked if they had any sort of chemistry, and my mind wanders to my job hunt. A few of my classmates say that they know great companies to work for. Apparently, mechanical engineers are invulnerable to the bad unemployment rate, but I'm really not sure if I just want to jump into things. Traveling would be fun. There'd be something immensely rewarding about sending Mike a photo of me on the beach while he'd be studying for midterms in the middle of October. Totally worth passing up an easy job for. A sudden blaring noise comes from the kitchen. I jump up into the thick smell of smoke. The omelet. Damn it. There's about a foot of black smoke hovering in the kitchen. I run in, pull my burnt snack off the stove and open every window, letting the chilling air in. My creation is a little more than ash, so I open the back door and throw it out for whatever animals are trying to get through the night. So much for that. There's some leftover pasta in the fridge. I'm happy to eat it cold at this point. I'm better off not heating anything up. I settle down and continue the movie, but my mind's going back to traveling. I've always wanted to go across the pond, check out Europe, maybe backpack through Germany, see the sights in France, practice my fake accent in Britain. What is it like there in the summer? Hot, I'd bet, but not any hotter than it is here, hopefully less humid. Again, my ringtone snaps me back to the real world.
Now you pick up.
Mike's shouting, but I can barely hear him. Wherever he is, the reception is terrible.
I've been calling for hours.
I look at the clock and roll my eyes. You last called me 45 minutes ago. Where are you?
I have no idea. The bus is going in the middle of nowhere. I have no idea where any of these stops are. Hell, I don't even think they're in English.
I sigh loudly. not this again. How much did you have to drink?
Drink? I can't even...
He trails off, replaced with a loud and harsh static. I pull the phone from my ear. A few seconds later, it disconnects. Whatever, he'll find a way home. The movie eventually ends, but it's just past midnight and I'm heartily tired. Now I'm regretting allowing my roommate to convince me to leave my gaming console at school. This was the perfect sort of boredom for grabbing a sniper rifle and telling 12-year-olds how great their moms are in bed. And then Mike could have joined right in. He probably spends more time playing than I do. He doesn't even live with me. I think my parents are relieved that we're going to the same school. He's been trying his absolute best to get his life back on track, and I'm able to be there in case he needs a shoulder to lean on. A loud scream comes from the backyard. I go back into the now freezing kitchen and grab a flashlight from the cupboard. I shine it around, but there's nothing out there. The remains of the omelet are gone, and there's a ton of paw prints around the area. Raccoons, squirrels, maybe coyotes? Whatever they were, they moved quickly. The smoke in the kitchen is gone. I close all the windows and lie back down in the living room. I guess I doze off because when I wake up, it's 1:30 in the morning. There's been no contact from Mike, so I give him a call.
Hello?
Now it's like he's talking into a phone on the other side of the room.
Are you there? Please say something.
I'm here, I say slowly.
Have you figured out the way home yet?
I can't. Despite the low volume, I can hear panic in his voice.
I've been riding for days, maybe weeks, I can't tell. Transferring from bus to bus. None of them are going anywhere.
I swear, I can hear him whimper. I can't help but grin. I'm going to hold this against him for years.
I don't want to get off. There's something wrong around here. Something dark. It's waiting for me.
Yeah, it's called the Night. And it's not very friendly to blackout drunks now, is it?
Stop it! Stop it!
He fades away. Hello? Mike? I check my phone. It's still connected. If you can hear me, just get off and grab a cab, okay? He comes back with a slightly clearer voice.
We've just passed Wedmore. I recognize this place.
That's good, seeing as we drove by it nearly every single day when we were kids. I sit up, and suddenly I'm feeling groggy. Time for bed. Anyway, I'm gonna go—
No!
He shouts forcefully.
Please stay. Don't hang up.
Okay. Now I'm wondering if he took any substances beyond alcohol. It's like he's combined the hallucinations of shrooms with the depressants of beer. I grimace. It's what the old Mike would have done.
Just talk to me. How are things at home?
They're good, I say. There's a bunch of animals outside making lots of noise. I think they're raccoons, but it could be bears. Might want to watch yourself.
Cool.
The connection's even better.
I just went over the bridge. I'm a few stops away.
And there you go. Was there any reason to have been concerned?
Like you wouldn't believe.
He pauses.
Man, I cannot wait to get home. I think I can hear my bed calling me.
Is it saying, "Clean me"? He laughs, loudly and heartily.
I'm nearly there. Jesus, I'm glad the night's over. Thanks for not hanging up.
I'm always here. You know that.
It was weird.
He continues.
I couldn't call or text anyone. I tried to get on Facebook, but it looked really strange. As soon as you called, I realized where I was. It's like it came out of nowhere.
His voice rises.
And there's our street. I'll call you when I'm near the house. Holy crap. That's dark.
He hangs up. I go to the front window and look out. All the streetlights are on, casting their pale orange tint on the road. I gaze as far down as I can. No sign of him. I'm about to go and clean up the kitchen, but my phone rings.
Where the hell is our house?
I throw my free hand up incredulously. The same place it's always been, you idiot.
I can't see it. The street's way too dark. I don't even know if I'm on the sidewalk or the road.
What are you talking about? It's bright as day out there. I go over to the front door and flick the outside light a few times, showing off our snow-covered driveway, the one Mike was supposed to shovel before heading out. There, can you see?
I saw!
He screams.
The light! Turn it back on!
I do so, even though it adds nothing to the overall brightness of our neighborhood.
I see it. Okay, yeah, I'm close now.
I look out the window, but still can't see him. There's just a pair of headlights coming down the road. How close are you?
Nearly there. Oh, thank God, I'm nearly there.
The headlights slow down at my driveway. Are you in a car?
No? Do you know how easy a car would have made all this?
I scoff. I think there's a lot of things that could have made this easier. He's silent for a moment, and then he sighs.
Look, I know what you're thinking, but I swear, I only had a few drinks.
His voice lowers.
I'm done with that other stuff. I made that promise. I'm going to keep it.
I know. The car's pulling into my driveway. It's the police. What's going on here?
I'm steps away. The house has never looked so good.
Mike says. The car stops and 2 officers get out, both struggling on the slippery driveway. They take their caps off and hold them against their chests. No.
What is it?
Mike asks.
I'm in the driveway. Can you see me?
The world stops around me. This was supposed to be just another night. Everything I'd done, the movie, the omelet, those animals outside, what I'm going to do when I graduate, had been so inconsequential. That was the point. That was the goddamn point. The officers are walking up the steps. My throat is suddenly very tight, but I manage to get the words out. Yeah, bro, I can see you.
Awesome. I'll be there in a minute. Thanks for guiding me home.
It's what I'm here for. I take a deep breath. See you soon.
I can't wait.
He hangs up. A few seconds later, there's a knock on the door.